In the young millennium, the Americans and Russians are heading to Earth's neighboring planet Mars. But during final preparations, a Russian general seizes power in Russia and threatens world peace when the mighty Russian fighting machine invades neighboring states in Europe. Commander John Norton, America's most successful astronaut, is sent to the new and modern space station Constitution to lead the Mars mission. But something goes wrong, horribly wrong, as the Mars astronauts are struck by an unknown disease. Or will humanity's first manned mission to Mars also be its last? For 400 kilometers below the space station, the Earth is on the brink of World War III. The public had observed Constitution. Some people saw it many times during a single late evening. For example, one observer in Arizona saw Constitution 13 times in a 91-minute interval. That's one orbit of the Earth. It raced across the sky toward a starry sphere that was significantly larger and brighter than Venus. Its speed was approximately 9 kilometers per second, so even under the most favorable conditions, it was only visible for a few minutes at a time. Over a period of 4 years, 24 trips by 4 different space shuttles brought up the various parts of Constitution. It took 15 years of planning to get everything just right. Every screw, every nut, every detail of the construction was thought out from scratch. The assembly itself was an unparalleled dimensional puzzle and a formidable exercise in logistics. At the end of the 24th flight, the crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour undocked from the station for the very last time. They had just completed work on the 4th and final quadrant of the station's pressurized hull. With that, the main construction of the Constitution space station was finished, and the United States, approximately $30 billion poorer. Washington, D.C., the young, masculine American vice president shake hands with his new visitor in the line. "Mr. Chairman, I don't think we're getting anywhere. NASA isn't giving me any information. ESA isn't giving me any information. Only the Russians are willing to speak up for once. Are there problems with the Mars project? Is it true that unpredictable diseases have broken out on the Constitution?" The newly arrived man straightened his wrinkled jacket. He had been called to a meeting at the White House in a hurry and had flown in from Texas almost 6 hours ago. "Mr. Vice President, I have just received reports from Dr. Randall, the doctor stationed at our space station. There is a temporary flu epidemic among our Mars astronauts. With fever and irritating colds as accompanying symptoms, the Russians have the same so-called problems. So you can confirm to me that the departure from Mars will not be postponed or, in the worst case, canceled." The two men stared intently into each other's eyes. It was no secret in the capital that the two men did not like each other. "No postponements, no cancellations, sir. You have my word. But why the rumors, Mr. Chairman? All the damn newspapers in Washington, New York, Chicago, and LA are quoting unofficial sources from the Constitution and NASA about problems in space. And now you sit here and tell me there are no problems. Who should I believe? What should I believe? And what should I tell the man in the Oval Office?" The chairman reached for the folder he had brought with him on the floor. From it, he took out a chart. "I intend to put a stop to these false rumors, here and now, today. I have appointed John Norton as the new head of Constitution. He will guarantee to stop all sensational stories and send the Mars spacecraft on time. Nothing must stop the greatest event of this virgin century. Man on Mars. Aha. Now I remember John Norton, pilot of our space shuttle that rescued the Russian cosmonauts from Mir 1. One man. And there's more, sir. He was originally NASA's choice as our man on Mars, but he politely declined due to personal reasons. Personal reasons? Serious reasons, sir. He is also the co-designer of Constitution, even though he has never been on board the space station. He is our man on Constitution. And John Norton, when does he travel to the Constitution? The chairman glanced at his wristwatch. The space shuttle Atlantis takes off in 30 minutes with supplies for the Constitution. Commander Norton is on board. The vice president looked long and hard at his calm employee. Yes, Mr. Chairman. The vice president deliberately paused for a moment. He loved it. He was number 2 in the country, and only one person had more say, but he had time to wait for his turn. He had the power to carry out any decision, including firing the chairman of NASA, but not this time. He nodded with satisfaction. Well done. I believe you have acted wisely and correctly. An unperturbed chairman replied, We don't disappoint, sir.
John Norton reporting. Every time I experienced this amazing feeling of orbiting the Earth, my inner soul was filled with warmth. It was my 5th trip on the shuttle. It's only once did I not have time to enjoy the view. My solo performance in the Space Shuttle Discovery, where I single-handedly rescued 3 Russian cosmonauts from Mir 1, a work of madness. At the critical time, there was no time to find other NASA astronauts. Fortunately, a shuttle was standing by on a launch pad. I, along with the space leadership of both the US and Russia, decided to take off. At the same time, Tina, the only female crew member of Atlantis, hadn't forgotten to service him. She was crawling up from the shuttle's mid-deck. In her hand, she held a small container with a straw on the top. Coffee, Commander. Yes, please, Tina. Commander, we're receiving signals from Mission Control. Colonel Spaulding, head of Mission Control, wishes to speak with you. Thank you. Put him through. A moment later, a gruff voice crackled in my ear. John, it won't be long now before you're on board the space station. I trust you'll get things moving quickly up there. I've just received orders from the Vice President that nothing, I repeat, nothing is to delay the departure of Mars. Our 2 men have saved themselves a little flu. That means nothing to highly trained astronauts, the colonel said. Don't jump to conclusions, Spaulding. You know that I do not send our astronauts off on the mission unless they are 100% healthy. Influenza in a weightless state is a serious illness that should not be joked about. When I arrive at the Constitution, I intend to review all upcoming treks with Dr. Randall and the Russian commander of Mir 2. Then I will ask for a statement from the doctor. When I have received it verbally, I will give you my answer. All right, Norton, but just get them out of here in 30 days. Is that a deal? You'll get my answer when I've thoroughly investigated the conditions on board, and not before. You'll get no guarantees from me yet. At that moment, Atlantis made a 180-degree turn. The shuttle was ready to dock with the Constitution. The conversation between the 2 vessels increased. Information was passed on and processed. A pump activated a flexible airlock. In a few minutes, the docking bay rose exactly 1 meter above the main body of the shuttle, like a deer stretching its neck for leaves at the top of a tree crown. With great care, the airlock and the center module approached each other, all calculated again and again by the vessel's supercomputers. A little nudge told me that the docking had been successful. Atlantis airlock, extending from the cargo bay, had hit the center module's airlock with 100% accuracy. A short rest of air followed. I had arrived at my new home for the next 3 months, or so I thought. For me, John Norton, Constitution's 9th Commander, now began the nightmare that would follow me for the rest of my existence.
Simon Hayes from England Space Association positioned himself at a video screen and activated a camera from Airlock 5. The shuttle had slid in towards Constitution. A tall and broad man swung through and stood up inside the hatchway. Simon activated the internal radio system. Sally, inform Commander Banks that John Norton is on the way. A deep female voice quickly replied, Commander Banks has informed me that he does not have time to receive Norton. Simon frowned and nodded. Well, I don't blame him. I'll take care of John Norton. Commander John Norton, welcome aboard the Space Station Constitution. Thank you. Lieutenant Hayes, I'd like to speak with Commander Banks and Dr. Randall as soon as possible. It won't be a problem to talk to our doctor. Commander Banks, on the other hand, wants to leave the Constitution as soon as possible. I hope you understand. I understand him perfectly well. They reached a small cabin before the long command center. It takes a lot of modern hardware to operate a space station. I'll get to all that when we're in the next cabin, said Simon Hayes. He opened the hatch further and introduced, Commander, may I introduce Sally Mansfield. She's our onboard lab technician, but due to staff shortages, she's taking over Mike Travis' daily duties here. But I'll leave the medical details to Dr. Randall. Welcome on board. I hope you'll settle in, said Sally. Thank you very much, Ms. Mansfield, replied Norton. Norton was known for being a stickler for formality. Sally shook her head and gave him her infectious smile. Please call me Sally. We're going to be living off each other for the next 40 days. After the 40 days, the plan was for the 3 permanent astronauts on Constitution to return to Earth and be replaced by a fresh new team. Norton expected to stay on board for 90 days, which was the normal period for an astronaut. Okay, thanks, Sally. I'll try to get air conditioned right away, said Norton. The other times in space have been no problem despite the dizziness the first few days. That partition wasn't part of the project I helped design. A change. Yes, Commander. In what we call the habitable modules 1 and 2, Space Shuttle Discovery brought up unassembled partitions. This was to create an extra hatch for the space station commander. The cabin at the opposite end is currently Commander Banks' private quarters and is now yours. You will take it over as soon as Paul Banks leaves the Constitution. He will in 30 minutes. The words came from a deep and saddened voice. Norton and Simon looked towards the now open hatchway. Startled, a small, stocky black-haired man floated away from the module. Like a man underwater, he dived towards Norton. He reached out his hand, causing Norton's body to stop his movement. They looked at each other inquisitively. Commander Norton, welcome. I hope you will be well after a long journey. I've packed my stuff and am transferring it to the shuttle. After that, I won't disturb you anymore. The Constitution is yours, said the man. Thank you, Commander Banks. Commander Banks raised his hand and interrupted. No need to apologize or explain. I know you're acting on orders, just like me. Goodbye, Commander, and good luck. You'll need both and more, said Paul Banks. Commander Banks bowed and walked slowly back to his quarters. Before closing the hatch, he said quietly, Commander, my cabin will be yours in 20 minutes. Norton and Simon looked at each other sadly. A bitter man. Lieutenant, perhaps so. Commander, he's really put his heart and soul into this job, but he's also a realist. Perhaps you'll feel the same way once you've refamiliarized yourself with things on board and understand their proper context, replied Simon. Maybe you're right. They entered the main room. Welcome to Constitution's living room. Behind me is Module 2, which is the space station's habitation module. It is divided into 3 separations, just like Module 1. Over there is the toilet, and here is the shower. The cabin is relatively transparent. We are allowed 1 shower a week, but I will explain the many house rules later. Simon pointed to a bulb that was dimly lit. If you don't want to be bothered during your toilet visit, remember to turn the light on. It clearly shows that it's occupied. He positioned himself at the entrance and blocked the hatch. The partition in Module 1 and this partition were transported up to the previous team. The rest was built 5 months ago, when the previous crew prepared the Constitution for the Mars mission. The management on Earth had realized that there would be times when they would need to talk in absolute privacy with the station commander. At the same time, the administration expects to develop a hospital module at a later date. Now the partition behind us is a precursor to the module itself. In the beginning, surgical tools and surgical techniques were practiced. It's not exactly convenient to be a practicing doctor in a weightless state. Unfortunately, our little cubicle has become a real hospital with 2 patients. Dr. Randall. Yes, Simon, said a deep voice from behind. Commander Norton has come aboard. He would like to meet you, said Simon. Okay, send him in, replied the doctor.
John Norton reporting. She stood directly in front of 2 stretchers. I could only see her back. Her voice was soft, almost whispering. Just a moment, Commander. I'll be done in a minute. Take all the time you need, Doctor. Both side astronauts lay passive. Their skin was wrinkled across their entire faces. Their eyes filled with inflammation, which was stuck to their eyelids. She whispered, Commander, welcome aboard. Have you seen the space station? Yes, thank you, Doctor. I whispered back. It was a quick tour, but I had plenty of time to get to know every nook and cranny of the Constitution. Doctor, as far as I can see, our Mars astronauts are on respirators. A tease, it's a kind of respirator. I had to lean on one of the stretchers. I needed time to regain my composure. Oh God, it's worse than I imagined. What is wrong with them? Radiation sickness in the body and brain, Commander. Probably from the Mars spacecraft's nuclear-powered propulsion system. Radiation sickness in the brain. But how's that possible? I've seen the drawings of the nuclear engines. They're mounted on a long spear away from the living module. And behind the module, there's a radiation-proof barricade, okay? And the strange thing is that all 4 astronauts have only trained in the living module. None of them have been near the atomic engines. All 4. Do the Russian cosmonauts have the same illness on Mir 2? Yes, Commander. They have also been exposed to radiation and have exactly the same symptoms as our people. I am in daily contact with Mir II's scientific chief, Viktor Sakov. We have no doubt they are identical. Can they hear us? I don't know, Commander, she whispered back. Rick Pert, can you hear me? It's John Norton. I turned to the other patient. Mike Travis, it's John Norton. Answer me. I stared back at Dr. Randall. Despair shone in her bright eyes. Her slender hands twisted helplessly around each other. She shook her head in resignation. Is there hope, Doctor? The chances are slim, but where there is life, there is hope. An uncontrollable anger was rising in my head. But Mission Control and NASA management, surely they must know about the serious illnesses in space. They do, Commander. All reports and electronic statements have been destroyed and rewritten by management. In fact, I'm surprised I haven't been replaced by another doctor. Nothing must stop the Mars project. Nothing. Unbelievable. Management has fabricated a story about the astronauts having the flu. I will make sure that this mess is cleaned up. Someone down on Earth must be held accountable for these truly criminal and immoral methods. A number of completely unforgivable mistakes have been made here. I gave her one of my sharp looks that pierced right through her. Why, I daren't know. She had no doubt that finally something was happening. I lowered my voice. It's going to be a long and tough battle, and I need your support 100%. Can I count on you? I received proof of the highest degree of self-discipline. I need all the help I could get. Can count on the entire crew of the Constitution, Commander.
Simon gave Norton a serious and shy smile. We have contact with Mir 2. I've shielded the signal so that Mission Control and our friends from Moscow can't listen in. There are probably some people at the top of our system who will get hurt in a certain place when we communicate with each other outside the set program. Unfortunately, it's not 100% safe, but thank you, Lieutenant. That's fine. I've made visual contact with Mir, but as yet there are no people to see. A middle-aged man with straight silver hair and large sideburns came into view. Hello, John, and welcome back to space. Thank you, Victor. You're a regular fixture on the Mir stations. I've noticed. Norton smiled broadly at his old friend. Well, John, I'm getting older too. It's become a way of life, and no one can touch my record for the most days in space. Almost 500 days. I've experienced all 4 seasons. I was launched in the fall, was in orbit all winter, spring and summer too. An amazing contrast to experience how the white winter gives way to the green spring and lush summer. Norton was certain that Viktor Sakov was the Russian who spoke the best English of anyone. In the Russian space program, which could be attributed to 3 years at Oxford University as a visiting lecturer. So don't tell me that traveling to Mars is impossible. My long stay on Mir has proven it. Sakov's smile disappeared. Is the line secure, John? We think so. How are things on your side? Terrible, John. There's nothing we can do. Our cosmonauts are in a coma. The only help we're getting is our video conversations with Randall. We've agreed to send them back to Earth as soon as our shuttle arrives. I expect it in 48 hours at the latest. Radiation sickness, the Russian scientist in physical, replied without hesitation. Yes, radiation sickness. I can only support Dr. Randall's theories. The Mars astronauts have the same disease. From where, and when they receive this enormous amount of radiation, we can of course only speculate. Since sunspots have been ruled out, we are left with only one source, Cosmos. What does Moscow say? They are awaiting the situation. Our Supreme Council of the Space Agency wants to send the backup group, not with this supply ship, but the next one. We're flying a constant with our shuttles at the moment. At first I thought the same thing, but it's not wise. We can risk the backup astronauts catching the same disease. It is not safe to send the new team to the Mars ship before we know where the radiation is coming from and why. I agree, John, but you have to remember that for the management on Earth, there is great prestige at stake and that it is important to get there on time, whatever the cost, even human lives. Victor, I intend to find the fault and stop this madness, even if it costs me my career at NASA. I'll get back to you when I have more information. Out from Constitution, Norton disconnected and turned to Simon. No one can go up to the Mars spacecraft. It's a done deal. I'll discuss it with Earth management. Understood, Commander. Get Colonel Spaulding in Houston. I'll talk to him from my quarters. Well, Norton, are you settling in well on our wonderful and expensive space station? Despite only being on board for 2 hours, I've been on a tour. I'm already feeling comfortable physically, but I can feel the beginnings of space sickness mentally. It will probably be a long time before I am up to par with the situation up here. What do you mean? Norton was impressed by the Colonel's convincing expression. A big question mark was painted on his face, but he couldn't fool the American. Spaulding knew personally about the radiation sickness in space. Why did you lie, Spaulding? Commander, believe me, we didn't think it was that bad. But that Commander Banks and Dr. Randall exaggerated their reports. What about the Russians? Weren't they the same as Banks and Dr. Randall's? Yes, but we were sure that both Constitution and Mir II were wrong, or will mess up the planning. Everyone knows that Banks and Viktor Sakov are personal friends, and Banks was obviously disappointed that he wasn't chosen after you said no to Mars. It's obvious that he wanted to take over a vacancy left by the sick astronauts. Norton couldn't believe his ears. Had Earth management really believed in a plot by the two space stations and the two countries' best astronauts due to personal disappointment? Stop this nonsense, Spaulding. It is foolish and naive to think that our own people, as well as our partners, are intent on sabotaging the Mars project and the great work it stands for. I have personally seen the sick astronauts, and I can guarantee you and Earth management that these truly brave people are radiation sick. Dr. Randall's reports are accurate. Why these poor men are attacked, I intend to find out. I suppose that's why you sent me up here, to clean up this mess for the first time. Spaulding shouted back, Commander, this can't stop the Mars project. We have to get off at the appointed time. Both countries have invested billions of dollars in this project. We can't let this fail. Okay, Colonel, let's meet halfway. Give me 24 hours to survey Cosmos with our tugs. Then I'll send a full report down to you. If we don't find anything wrong with the nuclear engines or any other systems on board, you can send the backup team up here. Do we have a deal? Spaulding thought for a moment. He shrugged his shoulders in resignation. He was on Earth, Norton in space when it happened. That made the difference. He continued thoughtfully. I'll see what I can do. I'll give you 24 hours to investigate Cosmos. 24 hours. Whether it's by remote control of the tugs, satellite footage, or if you go on board in person, I don't care. But I want results. If Cosmos is not the source of the so-called radiation sickness, you have our backup group on Constitution in exactly 76 hours. I'll handle the issue with senior management and then the Russians. After all, we're on the same side, Commander, and that means getting Cosmos off to Mars. Not at the cost of human life, Colonel. I'll contact you in exactly 24 for any new details and an evaluation. Out from Constitution.
Astronaut Alan Tate reporting. It's raining in London town. A typical rainy day. I hail a taxi. Heathrow Airport. As I settle into the back seat, my cell phone rings. Alan Tate, hello. This is Charles Dupre, Communications Director at ESA, the European Space Agency. I've heard of it. I've actually worked for it. I know, Alan Tate. That's why I'm contacting you, okay? I replied, apprehensively. Would you consider changing your ticket from Sydney to Newark instead? What? I'm on my way home to my home country. I know. How would you feel about joining the ESA Space Shuttle Hermes next trip? She's leaving in about 48 hours. 48 hours, you must be in big trouble. I'll give you the short version. We've had some serious accidents. The 3 original astronauts crashed in the Andes Mountains 2 days ago. Unfortunately, the backup group was also on the bus. I know it sounds amateurish, but it's true nonetheless. Over the last 24 hours, we've been working hard to get hold of 2 French astronauts who are scheduled to leave on the next trip in 6 months. We have succeeded, and both are more than willing to go, even with such short notice. But we need a co-pilot, and you are the only one who can step in. You have trained for a space flight with Hermes. You know our space shuttle and our organization. To put it bluntly, you are our only hope. But why not postpone the trip until you have found another astronaut besides me? As far as I remember, ESA currently has over 15 astronauts. There must be plenty to choose from. It's true that we have the many astronauts, but only 8 of them are fully trained. Of those, 6 are seriously injured in South America. The last 2 are the ones we want to send with Hermes, together with you. But why the rush? Alan Tate, as you know, the Americans lost a space shuttle many years ago. It was later replaced by Endeavour. There was even talk of building a 5th space shuttle, but the plans were shelved. When the cost of a new one was transferred to Constitution, the Americans had only one choice, either a new space shuttle or a space station. But the lack of a 5th space shuttle is noticeable at NASA, especially at this point in time, when there is a massive round-trip flight to the space station now before the actual departure to Mars. According to the plans, Constitution is to be visited by a space shuttle 5 times a year. This corresponds to 1 visit per American space shuttle plus ours from ESA. And we must not forget that several of the space shuttles are 20 years old and should be retired. NASA supported the construction of Hermes financially when we dropped the plans in the 1990s. The only thing they demanded was to have access to Hermes once a year. This is a purely symbolic visit. We will show NASA and our internal economic partners, the governments of Western Europe, that our super space shuttle works. If Hermes doesn't take off, what then? NASA can't take back money that has already been spent. No, but they have threatened other restrictions. Can you give any examples? Yes, they have threatened to disconnect ESA Letter's Space Lab from Constitution. Impossible. It must remain. A threat they wouldn't dare. Guaranteed. And at the same time, NASA has diligently used our Ariane 4 and 5 rockets as a supplement to their space shuttles. We are talking about a major customer for us here, so the launch is vital for ESA. Dupré, yes, if Hermes doesn't get off the ground, we'll set ESA back 20 years and we'll have to start all over again. I regained my composure. No more nervous blinking. Well, it looks that way. I would never forget the dirty trick ESA management played on me so close to liftoff. The greatest moment of my life. It ended in the greatest disappointment of my life. Now I had a new chance. Someone else's misfortune was my good fortune. I was happy and didn't want to set any conditions. Who's coming with me? I'll send you some pictures. You're flying with Concorde from Heathrow in 4 hours in Newark. You'll join our new delegation. Among others, your 2 colleagues and the head of operations, Michelle Adler. On the flight to Newark, you'll be escorted by my assistant, Maria L., who will give you the latest information and other practical details. I could hear that Dupré was being contacted. Yes, Josephine. I hope it's important. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Dupré. It's important. I have a telegram for you to read. Code. Code. Send it through Outlook. I'll acknowledge receipt with the computer. Bad news, Dupré. This telegram is from our ESA embassy in Moscow. The Russian president has had a stroke. It is not certain whether he will survive. Age catches up with even great leaders. He has also served to terms. It's a tough job, but Russia is a democracy. Doesn't their new constitution say that the vice president automatically takes over? Yes, it does. But democracy is not stable.
Commander Norton is sitting in his private quarters. He is looking intently at a monitor. The other man, Viktor Sakov, is a Russian scientist. He looks older and wearier than his years. He presses a button on his radio, and after a hiss, a new voice comes through. John, any news? Yes. Victor, I'm sending our tug up to Cosmos, remotely controlled from here. Your video and audio system can talk into ours. In addition to the visual effect, other instruments will give us information about radiation hazards and other defects. It also has the advantage that you, with your expertise on nuclear reactors, might be able to figure out what's wrong. We would like to be connected, John, but I'm afraid I have some bad news. He lowered his head. It was clear that he was moved. We've lost one of our sick cosmonauts, Leo Potsner. It happened 20 minutes ago. I fear that the same will happen to our other cosmonaut within a few hours. Yes, it's maybe a matter of minutes. In any case, both will be sent down to Earth with our shuttle. I have received word from ground control that the shuttle is ready on the launch pad. They will be here in 35 hours. But you can rest assured, there is no backup group. However, there are 3 scientists who will be replacing some of our scientists on the space station. This mission has been planned for months and has nothing to do with the Mars mission. Well, I have information from one of my sources that there are only the scientists aboard your shuttle. 2, John, you've been misinformed. Surprise shown from Sokov's face. Barlov, Jamikov, and Kerbuk are our new science team. Yes, of course. It's happened before. Since you know how many people are coming on board, you wouldn't happen to know who they are. I happen to know that it's none of the people you mentioned, Victor. But as I said before, I have probably been misinformed. It happens. Can you tell me the names of the 2? Tanja Bunin, computer expert. Boris Arseny, major in the Russian Air Force. Does that mean anything to you? Norton noticed that Sokov flinched when he mentioned Arseny. The professor nodded back. Yes, Tanja Bunin is an accomplished computer scientist, trained in the West, perhaps the best in our space program. She will be programming our new onboard supercomputer, but I'm quite sure it's not her turn yet, not for another 3 months. And Major Arseny, a nasty piece of work, John. Sokov shook his head worriedly to show his antipathy towards the choice of the military man. He was a disappointed man. Arseny is ultra-conservative and extremely militant. For as long as I can remember, he has been opposed to cooperation between our 2 nations and a fanatical supporter of the old Soviet Union. It is still from an unofficial source that I have received this information. Of course you are better informed than I am when it comes to your own space organization. Let's not make a big deal out of it. Sokov seemed reassured and sent Norton a subtle smile. You're right, John. Victor, I'm sorry about your dead cosmonaut. Please accept my condolences. I'm very concerned about our own Mars astronauts. It doesn't look like we can heal them on Constitution. Dr. Randall is also reluctant to transfer them to the shuttle. What a dilemma. And you know me too well to know that I have no intention of ignoring deaths. Not on Constitution, or anywhere else where I have a say. Of course not. Our astronauts don't recover. You know that, and I know that. And probably also our respective leaders on Earth. It is therefore important to find answers on Cosmos, so that our backup groups do not suffer from the same radiation sickness. I hope we will know more when we have visual contact. You can count on all the scientific expertise that we are able to provide you here from Mir. Wait a minute. Victor Sokov disappeared from the picture. Only the pastel green wall color of Mir 2 appeared in the screen's field of view. Norton waited impatiently. The Russian's face came back. Again, my colleagues have just received information from ground control. You were right, John. It is Tanja Bunin and Boris Arseny who will be the future scientific team on Mir 2, a computer scientist and a soldier. That's not very scientific. Victor, you're right. Of course. I can sense that something is wrong, John. Something terribly wrong. I'll get back to you when I have more information. Do that. Victor, it goes both ways. Of course. End of Constitution. The usual friendly greetings were quickly overcome. Despite 6 people on board the main cabin on Mirdo at the same time, the space was no tighter than Tanja Bunin had predicted. Divided into 2 sports teams, the 6 cosmonauts sat opposite each other, the old team from Mir 2 against the new team from the Space Shuttle Gagarin, evenly divided, 3 against 3. Major Arseny, who automatically took charge when he floated on board, took the order. Before Gagarin leaves us again, we need to get supplies on board. For everyone's information, the next shuttle trip to Mir has been postponed. He stopped Tanya's slender body's obvious protest with an arrogant gesture. I know the old shuttle management promised you to come down in 25 days, but that was the old management. We have over 3 months worth of supplies. With your help, we'll have the 2 dead cosmonauts transported to the shuttle's cargo bay. If there are any questions, now is the time. Tanja was unable to protest due to a fierce anger that blocked any exclamations. The big major gave Sakov a triumphant smile. He placed his hands on his hips and sardonically demonstrated that he was comfortable in the weightless environment. Professor Sakov looked at the madman. It was clear that the military had taken over Mir 2. No more civilians on board. From now on, the commander of Mir 2 would be of military status. He thought about his homeland and the situation down on Earth. These were new times, or should he say old times? A scary time from the past with a totalitarian regime. Arsonage pulled out a video cassette from his traveling bag. He handed it to Tanja. She put the VHS cassette into a video machine and started it. The image of a fat, teddy bear-like and ruddy man wearing a Russian army uniform appeared on a small TV screen. His voice was slow but clear. To the crew of the Mir 2, the next few days could be the turning point for the fate of our country. Our leader, President Lieb, has decided to make the space agency a dependency of the Ministry of Defense. Exactly at 21:00 today, Moscow time, 22 of our divisions crossed the borders of Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the Baltic countries. The aircraft carriers have been sent to Latvia and Finland along with 6 nuclear-powered submarines. Russia claims its old borders from the Tsarist era and Stalin's reign. When they are achieved, peace will once again be secured in the world. We cannot accept such open borders with its homeland and has decided to intervene without hesitation. For the time being, Russia has suspended diplomatic relations with the US, EU, China, and Japan. All Foreign Service officers and the names in question have been recalled. The American ambassador has been expelled. Long pause. This is being done to ensure the Russian man's rights, freedom, and regained sense of motherhood. For a long time, we have lived under the tentacles and wild attitude of bureaucracy. Corruption has reigned everywhere. The Russian people have lost their pride. This suffering is over. After the election of our new president, General Lieb, Tanja didn't want to see any more. She stopped the machine and looked at the 5 cosmonauts in turn. The only one who kept his composure was the only one who was prepared, Major Arsonage. He brought the attention with a powerful clap of his hands. His voice was filled with pride. Finally, we show our true colors. For too many years, we have been reticent and complacent towards other powers. A second-rate nation. That is over now. Our soldiers are pushing forward our old borders that weak, drunken, and corrupt leaders have abandoned. The lost time of the post-war era, our glory days, will come again. With the power of one person, our leader, our president, General Lee. Hello, Constitution on top of everything. This is Colonel Spaulding with the latest information. Unfortunately, I only have 20 minutes on this line, so I'll have to be brief. Exactly 15 minutes ago, we sent a cargo probe from Earth. It will reach you in 3 hours, so be on standby to receive it. You don't need to worry too much about how to get hold of it. It has a computer on board with a pathfinder connected to it that can maneuver the probe into contact with one of your unused airlocks. But do me a favor and get the probe printed on your navigation radar. We can't help you if you lose contact with it. Thank you, Colonel. Norton replied. What is the situation? The situation here on Earth is hectic and unpredictable. The coup in Russia has been successful for the military. The conspirators killed over 50 men in the first hour of the takeover. Paratroopers attacked the Russian Ministry of the Interior at 4 a.m. The coup was preceded by years of intrigue, threats, and planning. Russian citizens were awakened on the morning of the 3rd of August and received ominous announcements on radio and television. They had a new leadership. Militarily, the coup covered the whole of Russia. The newly appointed defense chief and 6 battalions of elite troops carried out a precision attack on the parliament building. General Leib was ready to establish his autocratic power based on the old Soviet Union state monopoly, central planning, and a new union based on very right-wing politics. In an incredibly short time, he pulverized everyone who stood in the way of his armed forces. The Ministry of Defense at the Pentagon has received reports of fighting in Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the Baltic countries. Other large numbers of troops have moved into eastern Poland and Finland, and Norway's eastern borders with Russia are also under threat. This constitutes an attack on NATO. Countries and NATO is preparing to respond. The latest unofficial reports tell of fighting in Mongolia. China has begun to intervene. All fighting is taking place with conventional weapons such as tanks, aircraft, and modern small arms. Unfortunately, the civilian population has not been spared. We are talking about several 100,000 dead at this point. But we do not know what the Russians are capable of, or how far they will go. But what now? Colonel, you have sent an unmanned probe with various necessities up to us. Wouldn't it be better to get us down? We don't have that luxury, Commander. Believe me, if it were possible, we would bring you down. But if we could get you down, would you be interested in that? I can guarantee you that you are safer on the Constitution than anyone on Earth. At the same time, I would like to inform you that NASA has launched Operation Isolation. This means that you will be isolated until we achieve normal conditions. Norton interrupted. I am familiar with Operation Isolation, an untested ecological mini-system that may extend our capacity on the Constitution without interference from Earth. The system has been tested in a closed container in an artificial environment on Earth. The system is only at the experimental stage in our laboratory. Can it work here? We're pretty sure about that. Okay, when the cargo probe arrives, we'll start the preliminary work. It'll be good for us to have something else to focus on. Maybe Operation Isolation isn't such a bad idea after all. Maybe it'll be our salvation. Commander, my 20 minutes are up. I have to go. Thank you, Spaulding. We'll talk tomorrow at the same time. Over and out from Constitution.
Simon Hayes reporting after a conversation with astronaut Alan Tate. ESA Control, this is Hermes. We have just said goodbye to the re-established satellite. It has departed at exactly the right time. We expect it to start transmitting in 30 minutes. After that, we request 5 hours of rest before moving on to the next item on the agenda, spacewalking. Before Alan Tate could catch his breath, ESA Control's reply came in. Hello, Hermes. You are running on schedule. 5 hours of rest granted. Make sure you get some sleep, food, and coffee. We'll wake you up in 5 hours. ESA Control, transmission complete. Alan shifted his body around in the cockpit chair and turned towards the 2 French astronauts. They smiled at each other. Well done, Sandra. I don't think we'll have any trouble with that communication satellite. That's all we needed. We've spent over 6 hours on that thing. Sandra Nolan, who had repaired the satellite in the Hermes cargo bay, carefully removed her space gloves. She replied in English with a strong French accent. Assembling the various electronic parts was really complicated, Alan. I'm glad that my work was monitored by experts on Earth via video screens. In addition to the spacewalk, we have a lot of work to do in the field of natural science. We have worked for many hours ahead of us. Following orders and recommendations from more than 150 organizations and institutions from all over Europe, we have to take a large number of pictures of the continent. We also have to work closely with the Institute on the study of ocean currents and the biological productivity of the world's oceans. There will be plenty to do. But first, I need a good nap. Okay, Alan. ESA Control will wake us up in 4.5 hours. They stood without uniforms at the cockpit's front window. The colors of the planet they orbited hit them like a clear summer morning with blue skies. Gosh, it's a beautiful planet we live on. Low blue eyes. Alan enthusiastically blew a kiss to Earth. The break was over. It was time to get dressed and get on with the tasks at hand. Jean-Pierre and Alan tactfully looked at Sandra as she packed up her seat. It could make any man's heart flutter to see the little French girl wearing only a gray sleeveless t-shirt and small white panties. Alan quickly winked at the European pilot and whispered with a cheeky smile on his lips, Truly a little Parisian ass on a cute French woman. I heard you loud and clear. Lantate, Sandra shouted back, giving him a big grin. We're not in the bush, but in outer space, where there's no room for privacy. Alan shrugged innocently. Now she's being ironic too. The atmosphere on board Hermes was friendly, and their mutual teasing continued. None of them could have known that the next message from ESA Control would destroy the good mood. Good morning, Hermes. This is ESA Control. Fortunately, we have some bad news for you. We've had to keep some of it from you due to political pressure. But the situation here on Earth is so dire that we have decided to tell you the truth. Massive Russian troops have moved into independent states west of the Uranium Mountains. Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and the Baltic countries, as well as Kazakhstan and the border with Mongolia. The United States has responded by sending a large number of troops to the areas in question. We are talking about thousands of aircraft, over 50 warships, and an undisclosed number of soldiers, but a guess is over 50,000 men. So far, there have only been a few scattered battles between Russian and American troops. However, it is clear that the military forces of the attacked countries are trying to defend their land with all possible resistance. China has intervened in the conflict in Mongolia. France, Germany, and the United Kingdom are preparing their NATO forces for mobilization. This is all due to a Russian general who has seized power. Unfortunately, the militant forces have shown that this time they are stronger than Russia's fragile democracy. General Lieb has demanded the restoration of the old borders from the Soviet era. The Western-dominated, independent Eastern European countries. Poland, the Baltic states, and the former Soviet republics refused. The unfortunate result is that the Russians are trying to take these countries by force. The common currency union between Kazakhstan and the Russian Federation no longer exists. The Russians have attacked the independent republic on the pretext that the country oppresses the approximately 15% of Russians living there. All the affected countries in Eastern Europe have put up strong military resistance and requested assistance from both NATO and the EU. NATO has sent a large air force to northern Norway, and Sweden, by virtue of its EU membership, has agreed to allow the EU's own army to move through the country. The US has flown 20 fighter jets to Oslo and the surrounding area. The Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister has appealed to NATO via a civilian radio station for military support. Despite the fact that Ukraine is not a member of the Defense Alliance, the whole of Europe is on fire. ESA Control, what do? We here at the Control Center have agreed to give you two options. 1. You remain in space for another 48 hours. 2. You immediately launch Hermes rockets and return to Earth. ESA Control, give us a tip. After all, you're where the action is. We're up here. Alan Tate didn't know how to continue. ESA Control beat him to it. Hermes, we will give you the following advice. Stay in orbit for another 48 hours. The UN, the EU, and Switzerland are trying to mediate and find an acceptable solution for all partners. Perhaps they will succeed in stopping the two superpowers and their allies. If not, you are safe. The same cannot be said for us in French Guiana. We have observed countless American, Russian, and Brazilian warships in the waters off our base. We all hope and pray that they will find a solution. If not, we will be blown up. Humanity is creating its own demise if something very drastic does not happen very quickly. God help us. Apart from Hermes' factory noise, there was total silence on board. The three ESA astronauts sat separately and thought through the worst situation they had ever experienced. Anguished, shocked, and scared. Alan's heart was pounding so hard in his chest that he was in severe pain. He closed his eyes and forced his hands to massage his scalp. He could not and would not believe that the Earth was on the brink of a devastating global war. A thought that had so often crossed his consciousness, yet repressed. The thought had seemed absurd to him, bordering on the margin of insanity. And now, about his family and friends, were they prepared for the danger? Had they hidden in the basement, or driven out into the desert, or even volunteered for the defense of their country, his country down under? It's a hopeless task, a hopeless thought. Alan lifted himself out of the pilot. He looked thoughtfully and penetratingly at his contuberals. Of course, this could be our chance, Alan exclaimed, causing the other two to focus their attention on the Australian Constitution. Maybe we can take refuge on the American space station. It's worth a try. May I ask for your judgment? Jumper nodded thoughtfully. We might have just enough fuel to reach the space station, but We can find out. Let's contact ESA Control and Constitution and see what they have to say. It could be that Constitution refuses to take us on board because of their supplies and oxygen levels. We'll have to accept that answer. Jean-Pierre Morland agitation gripped him. Alan, you make contact with Earth and Constitution. Sandra and I will calculate a course and check if we have enough fuel to reach the space station. The eagerness to work gripped the three crew members. A deep voice boomed in Hermes' cockpit. It's time Alan recognized the voice as John Norton's. Hello, Alan Tate. This is John Norton. Do you have enough fuel in your engines to reach us? Yes. Commander Norton. And more. Eh? We can hit you exactly if we can acquire flight coordinates. You shall have them. See you in 10 hours? Relieved mood on board? Thank you, Constitution. We're on our way. Trans over.
In Mir's innermost world, Professor Sakov sat tiredly at the densely packed table of monitors. The cosmonauts lived and spent most of their time in the visually dominant main module, which was also the living module, where they slept, ate, and worked. At the other end of the main module was a control panel from which the entire station was controlled. The living area contained a small toilet, 3 sleeping cabins, and a dining table. His accommodation was almost brand new, and yet not, as its famous predecessor suddenly burned down. A Mir's sister module had to be retrieved from a hangar and sent into orbit. Russia desperately needed a replacement and could not wait for a more modern version of Mir. Therefore, the 2 space stations, with the only difference being a number change, looked like twins. He was on board Mira himself and could remember the disaster minute by minute. On Sunday, the 28th of October at 20:05 station time, a fire broke out in a defective oxygen generator on board Mir 1, a lithium perchlorate light caught fire, and during the approximately 4 minutes it burned, the light produced a large amount of smoke. The fire broke out when one of the Russian astronauts was replacing the light. The lights normally burn for between 5 and 20 minutes and are burned to generate more oxygen. For the cosmonauts, the 3 cosmonauts on board immediately grabbed their smoke masks, and cosmonaut Sibliev attempted to extinguish the fire using 3 fire extinguishers that were mounted around the space station. Thick smoke spread from the Capcut 1 module, where it had originated, to the entire space station. The cosmonauts were exposed to the smoke for 8 to 10 minutes from the time the fire started, until they had put on their emergency oxygen masks. Dr. Bishop had subsequently examined all the cosmonauts, including himself, and found that no one had suffered serious injury, apart from slight eye and throat irritation. However, the crew had to wear protective goggles and respirators until Mir's purification system began to clean the air. But the fire was too intense, and the cosmonauts had to take refuge in the adjacent Progress spacecraft, which was not designed to carry a crew. The fire lasted for 12 hours before Mir burned up in the atmosphere and disappeared forever. The 3 cosmonauts had to detach the Progress cargo ship from Mir and wait for an American rescue shuttle led by astronaut John Norton. He reached for the water bottle he had brought with him and took one last sip. He tasted the water and shook his head slightly. He thought it tasted very bitter. He put it down. The water in their water bottles wasn't always fresh, but as a space citizen, you got used to it. He began to sit and nod his head. Fatigue was slowly overcoming him. He had lived in space for so long that he knew drowsiness could come like a bolt from the blue, but he had taken a short nap earlier in the day, so he was surprised that he was so tired. He dozed off, and his brain conjured up the last scene he could remember, namely Major Arsenage taking him by the shoulder and handing him his water bottle. Then he fell asleep. She pulled down the zip on her sleeping bag, which was hanging vertically in relation to the orientation of the space station. Then she swung herself into the bag. Suddenly and without warning, the glass door of the private cabin sprang open and Major Arsenage swept away the curtain. That provided the last protection of privacy. Major, I must strongly protest your intrusion. This is my private cabin. Get out. Arsenage grabbed the frame of the cabin and pushed off with both arms, so that he floated the last little bit towards Tanja and pushed her out in the main module. Nonsense, Tanja. No amount of protesting will help. You need a man, and I'm the only man on board. The choice is clear. She didn't know it, but she was afraid that conditions on Earth had made Arsenage such a callous man that he had lost the last remnants of common sense. Believing himself entitled to take by force what no woman wanted, they collided and were thrown back against the rear wall of the main module. Tanja still trying to get away, but couldn't pull it out because Arsenage's entire body was holding it down. But you're not the only man on board. Where's Professor Sakov? Major, I must strongly protest your intrusion. Stop it. Stop now. Arsonage shouted triumphantly. You are mine. He got her bearings and figured out which direction her luggage were. It was hanging vertically, in relation to the orientation of the space station. Then she swung herself into the bag. She pulled her giant staff out of her luggage at breakneck speed. She performed a beautiful somersault worthy of a space veteran and faced a furious Arsonage. Now she was ready. She assumed the characteristic attack position, two hands on the shinai, legs slightly apart. She was ready for kendo, a form of budo that aimed to train body and soul, but was also known as an effective means of defense. But you're not the only man on board. Where's Professor Sakov? Tanja raised her staff again, ready for the first round if Arsonage wanted it. There was a loud bang as a bamboo stick struck skin. Although he tried to straighten up, it was clear that he was new to space, as he tumbled around the cabin and flew from wall to wall like a football. Tanja was a little startled. She hoped he didn't destroy any of Mir II's vital electronics. Finally, the end wall slowed down the wildly flying Major, and he crashed into the hatch to the adjacent section. He pulled himself up using a handle while wiping some blood from the corner of his mouth and cheek. Tanja raised her staff again, ready for another round if Arsonage wanted it. Stop, Tanja. We're done with each other. He grabbed the cover of the middle hatch and edged his way out into the Soyuz spacecraft. The last thing Tanja noticed was the cover slamming shut with tremendous force, and the gears spinning. Tanja Bunnan hurried over to the same hatch and locked it so that Arsonage couldn't get back in. Then she pulled her legs up to her chest and broke down in tears. She thought about Earth, her family, and her home. Why was she here now? What could she do? She looked around the main cabin and said loud, Professor Sakov. She wiped away a stream of tears and looked around searchingly. Where was Professor Sakov? She began searching for the Russian space veteran. Oh God, please don't let him be dead. He mustn't be dead. In the upper right corner, she spotted Sakov's lifeless body. His hands were tied behind his back and his legs were bound together with strong tape, rendering him unable to move. His utterly humiliating position in the right-hand corner was natural under the circumstances, as the weightless environment's moving air caused him to drift into the corner. Professor Sakov, can you hear me? She nudged him with her kendo stick. She breathed a sigh of relief when she saw him trying to move his body and making strange sounds. She grabbed his body and pulled him down. Thanked the powers that be that they were all weightless, so this operation could be done without any problems. Only now did she notice that he was bound with the same type of tape around his mouth as was around his wrists and legs. She cut his tape and he was free. They looked deeply into each other's eyes. Then they were both overcome by a desire to throw themselves into each other's arms. Oh, Professor, are you all right? Yes, it's not that bad. Major Arsonage drugged me by putting something in my water bottle. I couldn't hear him tying you up with tape. I was listening to loud music on my CD player. It was foolish of me. Tanja, you couldn't have known. He looked fearfully at her body, covered only by a torn bra and panties. He noticed that she was bleeding from her legs and arms. She had dark marks on her neck. He looked at her questioningly. Tanja, what happened? He tried to take me. He's sick. I hate him. What should we do with him? He didn't succeed, did he? No. I managed to get him away, thanks to my shinai. He's in the Soyuz spacecraft. He can't get back to Mir because I've blocked the hatch. Thank God, Tanja. He grabbed her hand again and squeezed it warmly, yet he could feel the growing fear, an anxiety that soon dominated their thoughts so much that everything else disappeared. They had to help each other keep their sanity. Are you sure you're okay? Yes, as long as you're here, and I know he can't get to us. Oh, Professor, why are all these misfortunes happening to us? He tilted his head inside. Maybe the gods are using us for their games. Tanja, we need to contact Constitution and Commander John Norton. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like we're getting all the information. That's right, Professor. There are things that are clearly being kept from us. Something catastrophic is happening down on Earth that we don't know about. If we're going to hear the truth, it has to come from John Norton. Unfortunately, this space station is so new that we haven't got satellite equipment for all the world's news. Stations. We can only receive our own TV stations, and believe it or not, I'm a CNN. Tanja tapped the control panel and reached for the microphone for the radio system. Professor, let's see if we can find the Constitution's radio frequencies. He gave her a thumbs up. Let's get started.
Simon Hates reporting. Commander Norton had seen the US president many times on TV or video. This was the first time he saw him in such a close-up as the command center monitor provided. Although the makeup department in the TV studio had done an excellent job, it was clear that the president had been under extreme stress for the past several hours. His eyes were bloodshot, his suit was rumpled, and his normally perfect hair was slightly askew. He nodded decisively to the crew of the space station. Yes, Commander Norton. Although I am well into my second term and you are one of NASA's star astronauts, we have never spoken in person. I very much regret that. Thank you, Mr. President. I wish our first conversation was about a better topic than what we are about to talk about now. I agree, Commander. And believe me, if there had been another option, it would have been taken. For the last few days, we have maintained a naval blockade around Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Poland. The Russians have been trying to break it, without success at the moment. We will, of course, sink any warship or shoot down any aircraft if they try, and they are making every effort to provoke an armed conflict. Just 2 hours ago, 3 Russian destroyers tried to breach our barricade in the Baltic Sea. Many warning shots were fired. The Russians ignored them. We sent another warning salvo. The response was an ignore. The destroyer USS Missouri launched 2 Eagle missiles. Both hit one of the 3 Russian ships. It sank immediately. 950 men perished. This morning, a U.S. surveillance plane over northern Poland was hit by a ground-to-air missile. The plane was neutralized. 45,000 of our elite forces are on Eastern European soil. Another 25,000 Marines are stationed in Central Europe. The entire U.S. defense is mobilized, and we are ready for battle across the globe. We are so close to a world war that only a miracle can save us. We are now making one last, and yes, you can call it a desperate attempt. I am personally taking the foreign minister to Moscow in one of our 2 Air Force One aircraft. Here he will make the final ultimatum. Withdrawal of all Russian troops to the current borders of the Federation, a referendum in the countries involved on whether they favor independence or a new union, the Soviet Union. After the referendum to be monitored by the UN, all countries in the region, as well as Russia and the US, must accept the country's choice without reservation. We believe this is a fair political solution that both states can and should live with. He looked down at his wristwatch. The foreign minister lands in 1 hour. If the Russians refuse to listen to us, there is nothing to do but fight to the bitter end. The outcome is well known. We're so far into this crisis that it is too late to pull out. I deeply regret this, Commander, but we have to do what we think is right. Once the world paid dearly to pacify an aggressor that should have been stopped long before. We did not make that mistake in 1991, and we will not make that mistake this time either. Raising his voice, the president spoke warmly. Make no mistake. The decision for war or peace is not made in Washington, D.C. It is made by General Lieb and his advisors in Moscow. I wish I could do something, but I can't. It takes 2 to play chess, and if the losing party doesn't want to draw, we have to make him checkmate. That's all we can do, except pray. For our safety, beloved country, for our home, our planet, may God forgive and protect us, Norton replied. Yes, may God forgive our mistakes. Satisfied looks were sent to all aboard the Constitution as Alan Tate's clear and fresh Australian accent danced around the command center. Finally, a voice with a warm and positive tone. It shouldn't be more than 5 hours, and we should be joining you. We all regret the current tragic situation. We hope and pray to the end that the American Secretary of State succeeds in making the Russians understand that this time it is serious. But I am skeptical. A well-known saying from my home region goes like this: never kick a man when he's down. I believe that the Russians are on their knees, and these people do not know surrender. They only have one option left. Press the button. Wait a minute. Silence. This is Alan Tate again. Our navigator, Sandra Nolan, has just informed me that we are on the right track. We have finally managed to track down Constitution's navigational computer on our own. We're flying now on instructions from it. We can't go wrong now. Commander, yes, Alan? We heard a little birdie singing about you trying to contact Mir 2. Have you succeeded? Negative, Hermes. Could it be that they've been ordered by Moscow to maintain radio silence? Your guess is as good as ours, Alan. But even if they have been forbidden to contact us, I know there's enough of a rebel in Professor Sokov that he will refuse to obey that order. or worried about what Major Arsini might do. He is one of General Lieb's most loyal supporters. Let's not forget that neither Sakov nor Arsini exactly love each other. What about the third Russian on Mir 2? A woman, skilled computer programmer. According to our scant intelligence sources, she's the neutral on board. Maybe they're sitting in separate corners of the Mir watching each other. Rockets have been launched from Western Russia. I am absolutely certain that our military's early warning satellites in Earth orbit have alerted the US and NATO defenses. It can only be a matter of seconds before retaliatory missiles are launched. Thank you, Lieutenant. It was the Russians who fired the first rockets, but let's not be judgmental about it. Because everyone knows, including the party that retaliates, that there are no winners. Sally, when can we expect the ESA shuttle to be at the space station? We can expect the shuttle at our future position in 90 minutes. Is the unmanned cargo probe in orbit? The unmanned probe has made rendezvous, Commander, but Earth has been very busy programming the orbit, so the solar wing has not come out of its protective shield. Norton gave her his familiar sharp look. What does that mean? One of the probe's solar wings cannot unfold, and the probe is not producing any power. Resting means that neither its pathfinder nor control mechanisms are working. Maybe we need to reach the cargo probe with the European space shuttle and get the electricity on board. One of the probe's solar wings cannot unfold, and the probe does not produce any power. Resting means that neither its pathfinder nor control mechanisms are working. Maybe we need to reach the cargo probe with the European space shuttle and get the electricity on board. Maybe a possibility, but does Hermes have enough fuel to catch up with the probe? Sally? No problem. The shuttle should use very little energy, and certainly less energy than a return orbit to Earth. It should be possible, according to our computer calculations. Commander, we have observed several missile launches from Russia, this time from the center of the country. It looks like they're sending all the material on its way. There are so many infrared signals that our instruments can't keep up, Sally shouted. This is the doomsayer's worst fear. What nature has taken billions of years to build, man is destroying in ours. I checked my instruments once again and added to Sally. I'm measuring rocket launches from us, China, Britain, France, and the Middle East. And an eerie silence descended on the Constitution. Sally and I stopped reading our equipment. One reason was as simple as not being able to see the geographical map for red lines anymore. The other was in their psyche and was called fear and pain. John Norton took over. Attention, the race called man. He heard his own voice, a lifeless voice, devoid of all emotion. This is John Norton on Space Station Constitution, built jointly by the United States and Western Europe. At this moment, unimaginable catastrophes are happening on Earth, created by the race. Man. Holocene-wise, the situation seems not only critical, but unprecedented in the lifetime of planet Earth. It is my judgment that the Earth is headed for widespread mass destruction. Sending people back to Earth at this time, and perhaps well into the future, is hopeless. Therefore, we dare not try. I repeat, that is why we are not taking the risk. But this space station can become self-sufficient if we work effectively and purposefully towards that paradigm. We have food, water, air, electricity, and power. Maybe in the future, it will be possible to return to a radioactive-free planet, and we can move humanity forward. We must hope for all living beings that it will be a better version of man. It is up to us at Constitution to take on these new tasks and truly tough challenges. May fortune favor us. This is John Norton, who takes the liberty of speaking on behalf of all mankind. May God forgive our mistakes. He stopped the radio transmitter. He knew that these impressions of a devastated Earth would be burned into his brain for as long as he lived. Whatever discoveries the future might bring, they could never erase this first terrible impression.
Tanja Bunyan reporting. After Major Arsene's failed attempt to force me, I never let go of my kendo stick again. I tied a string around the shaft and attached the loose end to my uniform. In weightlessness, the stick floated constantly half a meter behind me, like a dog on a leash following its master. Professor Sakov and me had spent several hours at the communication devices trying to establish video or audio contact with Constitution, but we had not succeeded. We were agreed that Major Arsenij had a transmitter with him in the Soyuz TM-53, spacecraft that could block the radio and video signals from Mir 2. Since his failed attempt on me, Arsenij had been staying in the adjacent spacecraft Soyuz. We had called him several times over the internal network, but Arsenij refused to answer. We have to lure him out, Professor. We can't even use you as bait. He'll immediately realize it's a trap, but what's more disturbing is that we haven't heard anything from Earth. Everything is quiet, eerily quiet. Yes, further proof that he has a transmitter that can block our signals. We must assume that he is communicating with Moscow. Soyuz has both radio and video equipment on board. Despair clouded us. Slumped in the comfortable armchairs of the control cabin, there was almost no energy left. If you shut off the oxygen supply, the person will be dead after a few hours. Soyuz gets oxygen from Mir's large tanks. As you can see here, Arseny has no oxygen reserves in the spacecraft. They are here at the space station. I can sit here quietly and calmly and shut off the oxygen to Soyuz. My program shows that it will take about 2 hours before the cabin in the spacecraft is emptied of oxygen, unless he lies down to sleep. During sleep, you consume less oxygen than when you are awake. I know that, but I think Arsenij has too much on his mind at the moment to allow himself the luxury of lying down to sleep. But I can't prevent that too. How so, Tanja? Sakov replied, surprised. I have the program for his internal audio jack. I activate the button from here and he has no way of disconnecting. It's for strict security reasons. Because it's always those in Mir who have control over the control procedure upon arrival at Mir. Every time we've called him on the radio, he's ignored our calls. But it's not possible for him to shut us out when I have the audio system program. We connect a microphone to our compact disc player and send music to Arsenij. And it won't be Russian military music. I'm a big fan of heavy metal myself and have quite a few discs with me. I'm almost 100% sure that Arsenij hates heavy metal. Sakov patted me appreciatively and comradely on the shoulder. He smiled admiringly at me. And we turned the radio up to full volume? Everything it can pull. And the best part is that we can't hear any of the music. It runs on a closed system. We can sit here and wait for a furious Major Arsenij. I don't give him even an hour, Tanja. Let's get started. He raised his hand and shushed me. I hear noise on the radio. Maybe Moscow will notify us. He looked at his watch. But that's 7 hours ahead of schedule. We held our breath. If it was Moscow sending a message, we could expect the worst. Sakov and I tried to be as prepared as one could be in a situation like ours. Sakov nodded reassuringly back to me. They must have communicated with Arsenij. The speakers crackled. Sakov's thoughts went back to space travel in the 60s and 70s. Nowadays, the technology was so sophisticated that there was usually little interference on the lines. The signal could have come from an underground bunker. To the surprise of both Sakov and me, the voice did not come from a human being, from a computer programmed to speak flawless Russian. The programmer had not taught the machine to speak with emotion or intonation. The voice was mechanical. I compared it to the synthetic musical instrument known as the vocoder. Cosmonauts on Mir 2. This is the defense command. We are in State C. The situation is critical. It has been decided by the highest authority that the Russian Federation cannot tolerate the Mir 2 space station falling into enemy hands. At the exact moment this message was sent, a remote-controlled bomb was activated on board Mir. It is set to explode in exactly 12 hours. I repeat, 12 hours. Do not attempt to locate the bomb. It is located on the outside of the space station. Even if you manage to locate it, it will not help you in any way. The slightest human contact will cause the bomb to explode. The Defense Command expects all 3 cosmonauts to do your duty and die for and with your country. It unites Russia and its leader, General Leib, is great. Cosmonauts on Mir 2, this is the Defense Command. We are located in... The radio message played again. Sakov jumped up from his chair. He looked at me in panic. They're doing it. They're doing it. I've heard about a plan for a remote-controlled bomb on board in case a foreign power take over of the space station or world war. But I was personally at a meeting with the Supreme Council, and I thought I had talked them out of this crazy idea. They promised me they would stop the project. They lied to me. I looked at him with teary eyes. What should we do, Professor? We must not go to panic. With this radio communique, we can be 100% sure that there is a nuclear war raging on Earth, and that is a terrible catastrophe. The pieces gradually fell into place. The conclusion was unmistakable. He thought of his family. I hope it will be quick for my wife and children and my immediate family. It's been a long time since I spoke to Olga, and now that chance is gone. We grabbed each other's hands. His head sank down onto his chest. Oh, believe me, Tanja, it hurts. It hurts in my chest and in my soul to lose my loved ones, my friends. I'll never see them again. We lay directly opposite each other in the weightless environment, our faces towards each other. He pulled me close to him and cried. He cried like a little child waiting to be comforted, and he was not ashamed of it. This is no use, Tanja. We must and must act. We must find a way out, here and now. But we can't survive on Mir. I know that. We have to convince Arsenij that it's important we get in touch with Constitution. Only the Americans can save us. I started to shake all over my body. I had to move to think clearly. What exactly are you thinking about, Professor? We have to leave Mir. I know Commander Norton will offer us a place on the Constitution. But, Professor, how can we transport ourselves to Constitution? Neither the Americans nor we have a shuttle dock to our respective space stations. No, but we can use the Soyuz spacecraft and dock with the part where their Mars transport ship was. It was a Russian Progress transport ship the American used. But in any case, we need to get Arseny out of Soyuz. Then we need to persuade him to contact John Norton. If he refuses, there's no chance of saving his life. He's probably also interested in staying alive. Maybe, I don't know, it's Arseny who has locked himself in. We who have cut off vital oxygen, that will mean a slow, suffocating death. And if he dies, it's certain that we can't get into the Soyuz and fly away. What are his plans, Tanja? Only the Major can answer that question. He's out of his mind. He has lost faith with us. He would rather die than apologies to us. You and I can forgive a man. Unfortunately, I don't think Arsenij is capable of that. Then let's agree to reopen the oxygen to Soyuz. Don't you think he realizes that Moscow has activated the radio-controlled bomb? After all, he's the one who made sure we could receive the radio signal. Maybe he's somewhat to the point that he realizes that he has to die one way or another. I saw a video film about a suicide bomber before I came back up here. Once he made the decision that he was going to die for a good cause, there was no stopping him. I think Arsenij thinks the same way, and one thing is certain. He has heard the radio signal from Moscow. At the risk of repeating ourselves again and again, his and our country has suffered a defeat. He would rather face death than admit it. And that goes for himself and perhaps worse, the crew of the Constitution. We need to get him out because he's the only one who can open the airlock. It is therefore useless to send nerve gas through the air pipes and into the Soyuz. Only an awake Arseny can open the hatch. I can only think of one thing that can lure him out of the Soyuz spaceship. He might realize it's a trap, but it's our only chance. You sound like you've found a solution. Instead of cutting off the oxygen, we need to send oxygen back into the Soyuz. In excess. I want the oxygen to make him slightly intoxicated, exactly to the point where he can't think logically. You want to make Arseny drunk, Tanja? Yes, a little drunk if you like. I see. And then what?
Professor Sakov reported what we, Tanya Bunin and I, believe happened in the Soyuz TM-53 spacecraft. Major Arseny took off his space helmet. It had protected him from the noise of the radio complex. He felt elated and could breathe again without difficulty. The heat in the cabin had subsided and he wiped the worst of the sweat from his face. Was it because of his elated state of mind that he had accepted death? He did not understand that the battle on Earth was lost. The internal radio rumbled again. He reached for the helmet and sighed. Now they were sending that terrible music to him again through the spaceship's loudspeaker. He hated that kind of music. He was trained to endure mental and physical torture, and his old training reflexes helped him through the noise. Yes, the pain. When he put on his helmet, he blocked out most of the noise. It felt good even though he got hot. At the same time, he cursed the foolish old rule that made it impossible for a Soyuz spacecraft to shut down the radio connection. A relic from the past and very strict security measures from the Soviet Union's space age. He prepared himself for the noise of the music and waited. No sound. At the same moment that he struggled to get up from the pilot's seat, the most beautiful piece of classical music flew into the spherical cabin. Arseny tried to gather his thoughts. He closed his eyes. There was a strange bubbling sensation in his head. Everything felt liberatingly light. He hadn't felt like this since he was thrown out of a pub in Gorky's old town, drunk as a skunk. What were they up to? To his great surprise, Tanya's voice sounded in the speaker at the same time as the classical music piece flowed beautifully in the background. Her voice sounded warm, almost exciting. He didn't believe it, but it was real. "Hello, Boris. Turn on your video screen. I have something I want to show you." Go away, it's a trap!" Tanya's voice echoed again in the cabin. This time it was softer and hoarse. "Boris, I regret what happened a few hours ago. Forgive me. Now turn on your video screen. I promise you, I'm yours now. Turn it on, and you'll see it with your own eyes." There was a short pause. A velvety voice surrounded Arseny. "I want you. Now!" Blood rushed through Arseny's body at an unimaginable speed. His body was about to explode. Without further thought, he threw himself against the wall of the airlock and turned on the video screen. The screen's color image was tiny bits that came together to form a beautiful woman in full figure, wearing only small red cotton panties and a matching bra. Her lips were painted the same fiery red color. Her hair hung loosely around her neck and shoulders. Wild and untamed, held in place only by a thin plastic necklace so it didn't float around in the weightless environment. Her bare feet were tucked into specially designed foot flaps so she stood exactly in the same place. She slowly let her left hand cards her flat stomach. At the same time, she blew kisses to the video camera in the mirror cabin. "Oh, Boris, I wish it was you caressing my stomach. Come out to me, come out now." She cast warm, seductive glances and moaned loudly. Arseny felt beads of sweat on his forehead. She was a fantastic sight. It was clear that she was athletically trained. He had trouble thinking clearly. The taverns in Gorky, it was spinning around him. He turned on the radio for the first time in several hours. "Okay, Tanya, you are a very beautiful woman and I am thinking of you. But what made you change your mind?" She replied without hesitation. "You are surely aware that we only have 11 hours left to live. When I received the terrible radio message from Moscow, I thought carefully about what my last wish would be. Many of them I couldn't have fulfilled, but one is present on Mir." "What wish, Tanya?" "A real man. You, Boris Arseny." She raised a bottle of vodka and made a toast. Alarm bells rang in the major's head, but he couldn't protest. His surroundings and judgment were so clouded that only a small remnant of reason tried to look for signs of a trap. "Are you drunk?" "Yes." Arseny let his gaze wander around Mir's control cabin. Even though the monitor did not cover the entire cabin, it was impossible for Tanya to reach a weapon before he had grabbed her. Without her weapon, Tanya had no way of pacifying the major. But perhaps that wasn't her intention. She had looked death in the eye, drunk herself silly, and decided to live life to the fullest while it lasted. Arseny shrugged. Why not? Wasn't it a natural and logical way of thinking to make the best of a hopeless situation? He had often drunk himself drunk before a demanding military exercise. She was his. She offered her body to him. He would never forgive her for humiliating him. He would not be hard on her. He would be cruel. The ointment ran down his jaw a little and became weightless. floating away when he decided to open the hatch between Soyuz TM-53 and Mir 2. He programmed the switch and slowly turned the locking mechanism. Then he pulled hard on the handle. On the other side of the hatch stood a seductive Tanya. She spread her arms out to the side, let the now empty bottle float away, and laid her head back with her eyes closed and her mouth half open. She beckoned him to come to her. "Ah, Boris, come to me, warm me up." He crouched in the hatch opening. He grabbed the frame itself and prepared to push himself into the space station towards her. She would regret it. The hour of reckoning was near. He would not be harsh with her. He would be cruel. One of his feet hit a container and kicked backwards, just like a swimmer pushing off from the edge of a swimming pool. His body was on its way through the manhole. His head, neck, and shoulders floated effortlessly into Mir's control cabin. Then came darkness. His senses stopped responding. For God's sake, Victor, why are your countrymen interested in blowing up Mir 2? It makes no sense. They had both exhausted all their violent emotional reactions in the previous hours, so they didn't start flapping their arms or putting on looks of astonishment or any of those signs of distrust. Instead, Norton just looked speculatively at Sokov's video image. "I know, John, but the Ministry of Defense has seen ghosts everywhere. Just the thought of you getting your hands on the space station during a crisis has them putting a radio-controlled bomb on Mir's hull. And believe me, they will use it. I never understand the Russian mindset. We said the same about yours." Professor Sokov then suggested, "Is Constitution receiving any reports from Earth? Just a little life-giving signal?" "Negative, Victor. Neither Constitution nor the European Space Shuttle Hermes is receiving any information. No communication at all. I fear the worst, and with good reason. We have observed an incredible number of missile heat sources on our infrared instruments. When they hit their pre-programmed targets, we don't know. It's doomsday. Unfortunately, I can only confirm we have also made the same grim observations from Mir. Armageddon is a reality. We have to get used to the idea, John." They didn't really understand. They were too shaken, almost paralyzed. "Okay, Victor, we have about 10 hours until Mir 2 blows up. That gives us time to plan. Of course, we've agreed here at Constitution that we want you on board. It requires several things." "Go ahead, John. We'll try to help you with the problems. First, your supplies. How long will they last?" "About 2 months, maybe a little less. According to Major Arseni, we are not supposed to return to Baikonur for another 3 months. This was not an agreement with the Space Command, but all old plans have been canceled and taken over personally by Major Arseni after the military takeover. In those 3 months, we were to be visited by shuttles and unmanned space probes. Do you have containers that can work in outer space so that the contents are not damaged?" "Yes, 8 of them." "Okay, fill them up with all the necessities you can find and fit. Food, water, oxygen, clothes, blankets, cutlery. Yes, you know best. Can you shoot out those containers so we can pick them up later?" "Yes, John. No problem. We'll use Mir's unused airlock." "Then it's settled," Norton replied with relief. "When you're done with the canisters, fill up the Soyuz orbital module with other vital necessities. I'll leave you to dispose of them." And Major Arsenij, lying in his own cabin, tasting his own medicine, hands and legs tied tightly to his body. We haven't heard anything from him, so I'm convinced he's still unconscious. He could be a problem at Constitution, Victor. We can't leave him on Mir. Although the thought is tempting, he's our pilot. Secondly, I don't want to be like him. If the situation were reversed, he would have left Tanya and I behind without hesitation. He hates Americans and he doesn't want to go to Constitution. Therefore, he has no choice. He has to go, voluntarily or by force, and I'm leaning towards the latter. Another slap with a flat hand on his cheek, and another. He dozed off again. Everything around him was black. He shook his head dejectedly and felt a stinking pain in the back of his head. 10 thoroughbreds thundered through his head at full gallop. His ear caught a familiar voice, Tanya Bunin's. "He's resisting, Professor. He's awake." Tanya's voice was harsh. "Arseny, listen carefully. I give you 2 options, but only 1 chance. 1, you will come to your senses. Together with Sokov and I, we will leave Mir in the Soyuz ship. 2, You will not come to your senses. We will leave you on Mir and you will blow up with the space station. Tell me about point 1. I know there's a war on Earth, probably with nuclear weapons. Have you confirmed this? Arseni asked casually. It was meant to sound casual, but his voice was more like an asthmatic frozen croak. Yes, Arseni, but only from our own observations and instruments. The war has started thanks to people like you. I'll take that as a compliment. The Russian nuclear forces have defeated the Americans and the Western Europeans. Of course, the bomb shortage has destroyed the entire US and Western Europe, but they knew the risk. We can land safely in Siberia. Nuclear war has broken out all over the Earth. We anticipate that there may be nowhere on the planet where humans can survive. In a few days, radiation from thousands of bombs will surround virtually the entire planet. These rays will kill all life. Perhaps a few isolated places will be missed, but we don't know that at this point. There is no way to return to Earth today or tomorrow, or in a year. He wanted to get up but couldn't as the band around his wrists burned into his skin. He hit with his head against the back of his body. She nodded back. As she loosened his bonds very slowly, he felt her taut body against his. The blood began to throb in his body. The desire for her flared up again. Just as he felt the tape was gone, he felt a thick stick resting against his cheek. He carefully turned his face. In front of the Major, Professor Sakov stood in attack position with Tanya's kendo stick. The thick bamboo tool was effective, and he was not interested in resisting. The professor nodded with satisfaction to the Russian officer. No chances were taken. One wrong move and you'll regret it. Arsenij ignored the Russian professor and took focus on Tanya. You want me to fly? Not to give you too many ideas, but you can program the computer at Soyuz and tell it to back away safely from Mir. I don't just want to back away from Mir, Tanya replied. I want to fly away, change orbit, make rendezvous, and connect. Arsenij's mind was working fast. Hearing Tanya's answer, he had come to the same conclusion himself. He refused to believe what he heard. We have an agreement with Constitution that we will connect with the space station. The preliminary tasks have been completed. Impossible! They are our enemies. What do you think headquarters will say when they find out about this? There is no headquarters, Tanya shouted back excitedly. Listen to me, Arseni. Let's make a deal. If Sakov and I can prove that it was Russia that started the war, will you be our pilot? And together we will form the team that makes up the Russian team on the space station Constitution. If we can't prove it, or it turns out to be the Americans who started the missile attacks and thus the World War, you are free to stay on Mir. All you need to look for in these specific measurements is the signal transmitted to our computer, as it observes the exhaust heat from various rocket silos. And unfortunately, they come from an area in Western Russia. The Russian major was convinced. We have a deal, Tanya.
The supercomputer on Constitution quickly calculated a new course for Soyuz TM-53. The docking module's trajectory was no longer than the Russian spacecraft, needed to fire its control rockets for 5 seconds and go full throttle for 8 seconds. During the same period, Hermes approached the American space station. The mini space shuttle had automatically positioned itself with its back to Constitution. Through the window in the command center, Norton and Randall could see the small control rockets flashing as they kept the space shuttle on course. The computers on board the two spacecraft constantly exchanged information. If everything went according to plan, Alan Tate would take over just before the final contact. Hermes' speed was reduced to 12,000 kilometers per hour. Safely and calmly, the two spacecraft reached the same orbit, as Constitution had a much higher speed than Hermes. It was important that the space shuttle reach the meeting point before Constitution arrived. Suddenly, a loud alarm sounded. The computer had sent a distress signal. It was up to Norton and Randall now. Could they solve the problem? Meanwhile, Norton managed to solve the computer problem. He contacted the space shuttle again and told them to come in for a landing. Once again, the two spacecraft approached each other. Constitution, we have you on the ground. Things are really moving fast. We have visual contact. Everything was turned upside down, but Alan did his best to ignore this unpleasant illusion. Looks good, Jean-Pierre. We've turned on an external camera. Dr. Randall is buzzing in on you now. We have great images of your front. I can see Alan. He looks like himself. Jean-Pierre, I can't see you in the cockpit. I'm definitely here. Commander, hopefully you didn't forget Sandra Nolan. Alan cheekily replied, we didn't forget her. We left her there on purpose. After all, there was time for banter. Sandra smiled to herself and put away the manual she had brought with her. Trying to follow a manual was unpleasant. It was best to close her eyes and relax while Hermes was pushed towards its new owner. There were metallic scraping sounds from outside, followed by a low thud. 3 cosmonauts were aboard the now combined Soyuz Sluice Mode Duel. Pilot Major Boris Arsenij sat in the descent module. In the middle was Professor Sakov, and on the left, in the direction of flight, was computer programmer Tanja Bunin. Soyuz TM-53 flew into orbit towards Constitution 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The next few orbits went according to plan. Soyuz prepared to dock with the space station. The Russians had radar and video contact. Tanya checked the spacecraft's primitive computer. A light on the instrument panel in front of the 3 cosmonauts flashed red ominously. Tanja remained calm and announced, the radar antenna will not unfold properly. The radar antenna was to be used for docking with Constitution. Soyuz TM-53 routinely contacted the Americans, Europeans, and a single Australian, Constitution. Can you see the condition of the antenna? Negative. We can't see the antenna, replied Norton from the command center. Alan Tate made a suggestion. Major, try turning the ship around. Maybe the antenna will fall into place by itself. We are attempting a docking based solely on visual observations and video cameras. Right now, Constitution fills half of my periscope's field of view. We're picking up speed. Now you fill 80%. I'm not sure about the distance. I'm having trouble seeing you. I'm checking our speed. He checked with an instrument. Continue reporting, Soyuz. I think I'm going too fast. He had taken into account that his bow had been extended by 3 meters. I prefer that we turn around. Proceed, Soyuz. Everything looks fine on all our computers. Reducing speed by 20%. You have the green light from our navigation instruments. I repeat, proceed with the approach procedure. John Norton paused briefly. The next sentence was a tribute to the Soyuz pilot, Major Arseni. My compliments. It was an impressive maneuver to enter unknown territory without the support of computers, radar, or methodical visual contact. The Russian pilot accepted the praise with a quiet thank you. He then reduced speed and maintained course. For minutes later, he succeeded in connecting the free end of the docking module to Constitution. He hit the space island as gently as a snowflake. John Norton compensated for the extra weight by turning the space station's axis so that its tilt towards Earth was shifted. He had calculated that the Hermes space shuttle could dock and undock a few times. The Russians were on board an American space station for the first time.
Dr. Randell reporting after conversation with Tanja Bunyan in the center module. Jean-Pierre Morland and Sandra Nolan floated restlessly around. The 2 French nationals were both physically and in particular mentally scarred by the nuclear attacks on Earth. They knew that nuclear missiles had most likely been launched at France, at their home city of Paris. The Eiffel Tower was most likely vaporized. They fell silent, both lost in their own sad thoughts. He was breathing heavily. She grabbed his hand and squeezed it. Yes, I've been tough, Sandra. Maybe because I didn't want to accept the disaster on Earth, because I refused to believe that Earth's politicians and military would throw the planet into a devastating world war. I've been harsh because I had a job to focus on as a pilot on Hermes, my dream job, my salvation, my nightmare. I've lost my family, my home. I don't think I'll ever get over it. She pulled him close. They held each other for a long time. They cried together. Sandra sobbed some words of comfort. You have me, Jean-Pierre. Remember that? They might be exiles from their home planet until the day they died. Commander Norton's quarters. Arsenij sat casually in Norton's armchair. Norton leaned all the way over his desk so that his body was flush with the surface. Every muscle in his body was strained to breaking point. His hard, stony face was very close to his Russian colleagues. His cold eyes glowed with anger, and his voice was loud. I have been told that you attempted to rape Tanja Bunyan on Mir 2. The Russian officer did not even blink. His English was peppered with Russian phrases, but it was understandable. That is in the past. Commander, I deny nothing, but she invited it. She is a strong woman. Norton backed away. I have the deepest sympathy for your virtues, but I have no further comments. Arseny made a move to get up. Norton pushed him hard. I won't be in the way, Commander. I will retire to my homeland's ship, Soyuz TM-53. There, I will carefully consider my situation, but we are limited in the number of private cabins available for everyone. I intend for you to share the Soyuz with your compatriot Viktor Sakov. Do you have any objections? No. But will he? Yes. I've spoken to him. Despite your incidents on Mir 2, he is such a magnanimous man that he has chosen to look ahead. Can you do the same? By the way, will you be coming to our orientation meeting in the living quarters? Yes. I don't want to be unfriendly or cause any trouble. Okay, Arseny, we have a deal. Both parties will abide by it. You have my word as a Russian officer, Commander. To Tanja Bunyan, the living quarters of the habitation module seemed like a main railway station at rush hour. People talked to each other, left the cabin, came back, talked to others again. Some cried while others stood in a corner staring into space. Despairing voices said things like, "No, tell me it's not true." Other crew members stumbled around in a trance. They hoped that someone would soon wake them up and tell them it was all a dream, a nightmare. She had to be brave and swallow her pain. The Constitution's crew was now her new family. No one could say how long the adoption would last, and she also knew that she would not be able to get along with everyone. She had decided that she would forget or try to forget. The terrifying experience on Mir 2, she did not know how she would react to arsonage, but she was sure that she would have heart palpitations and sweats when they met. Besides, she would try to stare him down when they met, precisely to show him that she did not fear him. The unimaginable catastrophe on Earth would overshadow her own experience, so that in time she would be able to distance herself from it. A tall, dark woman with black curly hair sat down in the other armchair to Tanja's right. She buckled herself in, and they smiled cautiously at each other. "Hello, Tanja Bunyan. My name is Sally Mansfield. I'm a laboratory technician on board, working in our laboratory module and space lab." "Hello, Sally," Tanja replied in flawless English. "My deepest condolences. It's a hard blow for all of us. Maybe I don't sound as affected as the rest of you. Maybe it's because I lost my family many years ago when I was young. It was one of many gang wars in the ghetto where I grew up. My family was wiped out in a split second, when a car bomb exploded outside our front door. My mother and 3 siblings were killed. I never saw my father. After the loss of my family, I started afresh. I got an education. I succeeded because I was taken into care by a wealthy black politician whose agenda was to help young black orphans like me. He demanded only one thing. No matter what time he knocked on my door, I had to let him in. I endured this for 6 years. By then, I had had enough. But most importantly, I passed my final exams with top marks, which were necessary to apply to the American Space Agency. Believe me, Tanja, I am depressed. We must assume that everything has changed down on Earth, but we don't know what yet. But I wouldn't be honest with you if I didn't tell you that my positive mood has taken on a new dimension. It has become considerably darker." Sally's voice began to tremble. The red-haired Russian looked intently into the dark eyes of the black woman. They sent signals of pity, compassion, and cries for help. "And you, Tanja, how are you now? What are you feeling at this moment? Hatred for humanity, hatred for the people who placed themselves above animals and plants, who destroyed the life we know. Who gave us that right? A life we should take care of and cherish, destroyed in a few hours? I am ashamed on behalf of humanity. I also feel a painful sorrow over the loss of my family, the loss of my country, my planet, the loss of my beloved father, the loss of my future." She paused. Grief overwhelmed her. "Your future is with us, Tanja," Sally replied quietly. Tanja fought back the tears, but finally broke down next to a strange girl from a strange country. "And then what happened on Mir 2? It was humiliating, degrading. I hate him too." Sally freed herself from her harness, grabbed Tanja, and gently pulled her uniform so that she slowly floated towards her. Tanja laid her head on Sally's shoulders, which quickly became wet with tears. She felt her warm and protective body. The American lab technician felt clean and strong. She smelled of soap, perfumed with anemone. She felt safe with the protective body that made her open up her feelings. Tanja cried loudly. Every now and then she felt Sally's gentle hand carefully stroking her long hair, just like her father had done when he told her bedtime stories. Memories flooded the computer expert, and she sobbed loudly in Russian. "Oh, Dad, Dad!"
In a safe orbit around the war-torn Earth, the modern and beautiful space station Constitution floated calmly in orbit, always caught in the Earth's centrifugal force. The station was a marvel of modern engineering, a testament to the ingenuity of the human race. It was equipped with everything the crew needed to survive. Never had there been so many people in the accommodation cabin. 6 of the 10-man crew sat around the table. Commander Norton paced the center of the cabin. He grabbed a handle by one of the sleeping cabins and stayed there. The only one missing was Simon Hayes. Norton pointed with authority to a video screen by the cockpit voice recorder. "Before we start, I want to check if Simon Hayes can hear me on the line from the command center." "I hear you loud and clear, Commander. Plus I see you in great digital signals. All right, Simon, once again, welcome aboard the Constitution. I must start by apologizing that we receive no human data from Earth. We only receive automatic computer information, electronic software and hardware that is pre-programmed, but vocally there is radio silence. We have no facts and can only guess, but your guess is as good as mine. We keep listening for signals 24 hours a day, I assure you. The living room here is 5 booths. Simon Hayes, Sally Mansfield, and Dr. Randall keep theirs. The 2 empty ones are taken over by Sandra Nolan and Tanja Bunnan. I've spoken to Professor Sakov and Major Arsenage. They are both committed to living in the Soyuz spaceship. There's room for a sleeping frame and a few personal items in the 2 modules. Sally, Dr. Randall, and I agree that we will use part of the space lab as a cabin for Alan Tate and Jean Pye. Ray Moreland. They get the last bit of space in the lab because we share the cabin with a curtain. He raised his voice, and a finger is a sign of attention. Let me make it very clear to everyone. The cabins are private. Only in the case of permission from the owner of the cabin may others stay there. He looked intently at Major Arseni, but the Russians looked back without blinking an eye. Norton continued unaffected. The first priority is to develop and establish a closed ecological system. Without that, we have no future. Finally, Sandra Nolan has expressed a wish to set up a well-being team. Jean-Pierre Moreland and Dr. Randall would like to assist with this team. As for Hermes, it is my intention to send it back to Earth, remotely controlled here from the Constitution. Several crew members made signs of protest. Norton raised his hand again, and a hush fell over the gathering. There was no doubt who was in charge of the space station. I know we plan to use Hermes to return to Earth when the time is right, but that may be a long time away. We don't know what's going on the surface, and the shuttle is the only spacecraft that we can send down through the atmosphere and send wherever we want. Secondly, and just as importantly, landing the shuttle requires a runway several kilometers long, and let me be clear, that doesn't exist on Earth anymore. Everything is bombed to pieces in civilized areas. Thirdly, it could be years before we can return to Earth. The space shuttle cannot exist in space for that long. It has a maximum lifespan of 3 or 4 months. After that, it has to return. If we're going to attempt to return to Earth, I would prefer it to be done in stages, perhaps with only 2 or 3 of our people. There's no need to risk the lives of the entire crew. The descent module can land anywhere on Earth as the module lands using parachutes. We just need to be patient, and otherwise the Soyuz will keep the spacecraft alive. Our next task will be to bring in the various probes, which contain many months' worth of supplies. We will also pay a visit to the Mars spacecraft. There are also plenty of supplies, instruments, and spare parts that we can use. We will make calculations on how long our current supplies will last. We don't know yet, but an estimate tells me that we have food, water, and oxygen for about 6 months. We have power as long as the sun shines, and it won't let us down. Before we end this time, let me just inform you that an orientation meeting will be held every day at 1800 here in the living cabin. The only person who cannot be physically present is one of the 2 people on duty in the command center, as we have an unbreakable rule that the command center must never be unmanned. The person on duty can follow via our internal video and radio network. That's enough for now. If there are no more questions, I will withdraw. Remember, we're trying to make contact with Earth. If we don't succeed, we'll download images from spy satellites in orbit. We also launch Hermes towards Earth. Alan can control the shuttle remotely from the command center. There are several electronic circuits and various computer programs that need to be produced before we can launch the shuttle. You will be kept informed as we progress. One last thing. Simon will show the newcomers who are interested around the Constitution. He'll be starting here in 1 hour. Simon Hayes observed that the Mir Eyes electronic signal disappeared from the radar. They concluded that the Russian space station had blown up. A glance at their stopwatches convinced them that it disappeared exactly 12 hours after Sakov and Tanja and Arseni received the fateful information from Moscow about Mir's destruction. The defense command from Russia had kept its word. Constitution was the last space station orbiting Earth. The crew that inhabited it were the last humans in space. Of the Constitution's 10-man crew, only Major Arsenage and Sandra Nolan were missing. Arsenage had briefly informed Norton that he did not want to know about Earth's fate. He preferred to stay in the small modules of the Soyuz spacecraft. Sandra had fallen asleep in her cabin, and no one dared wake her, The last 8 people filled the compact command center. Norton began, "We have managed to obtain images of Earth taken by 2 American spy satellites. These images are no more than an hour old. The satellite, codenamed KH-17, is a digital satellite." He paused and glanced at Simon. The Englishman was working with the images from the spy satellites. He turned his chair. "We have the images now. The first one is coming now." Simon pointed to 2 video screens on the dashboard. One showed an almost complete image of Europe, from Germany in the west to the Ural Mountains in Russia in the east. The other screen contained endless rows of numbers and other information. The computer switched to the next image. With each new image, the resolution got closer and closer to the Earth's surface. When image 4 appeared, the crew waited in suspense. 8 impatient people stared anxiously at the shiny dark surface. It was a sight more awe-inspiring than anything they had ever seen. Norton's pulse quickened as he leaned forward to get a better look. He stared, blinked, shook his head, and stared again. A large city with a resolution of 400 meters was slowly developed. All the city's buildings, roads, and vegetation had been razed to the ground, pulverized as if swept away by a powerful hurricane. A quarter of the image was filled with small or medium-sized fires. When they looked at objects, they could tell from the movements that there was strong wind or rain, which colored the sky black with dust and dirt. The city center looked like a white spot, flat and smooth as the palm of a hand. There was nothing left. "What city is this?" whispered Dr. Randall. Simon glanced at the other video screen. "Berlin." The first signs of the atomic bomb drop were clearly visible 9 to 10 kilometers. From the center of the explosion, the roofs of the houses were stripped bare because the tiles had been blown off by the shock wave. The grass was faded everywhere and had turned black. 5 kilometers from the center of the explosion, houses were flattened like cardboard. The roofs had been completely flattened and rafters protruded everywhere. For kilometers from the center, there were only piles of beams and boards. Further towards the impact site, everything was torn apart, massacred, or swept away as if by a supernatural force. Poles that had carried electrical cables and were made of iron beams were crushed and bent and stretched along the ground. The city was deserted, dead. The images were studied with horror for a long time. Even though they had studied them for several minutes, they could only look at this new destroyed world that had literally been turned upside down. The faces of the crew members were filled with grief and helplessness. For every man and woman, it was not just a frightening but a terrifying thought that had become reality. And another thing was to observe and thereby learn something. But reality was something else. And no one could be sure that people's old instincts for self-preservation would not take over in an emergency. Norton looked at the female doctor with an expression of pain on his face. And Berlin has been hit by at least 5 bombs, with 10 to 20 times the force of the one over Hiroshima. No comment was necessary, but the loss to art, to history, to science, to animal and plant life, to all of humanity for all time, could not be calculated. The wait was almost over. In less than 10 minutes, Hermes would dock with the space station. But first, there was a lot of work to be done. The time before the start went quickly. There were many instruments to be tested. Even though it had only been 20 hours since Hermes had last flown, no chances were taken. It was possible that an electrical control component had failed, that one of the navigation radars was malfunctioning. There were thousands of electronic systems that could, in theory, fail. The latest data was encoded into the 3 computers that controlled the entire flight. The next few minutes were spent preparing for a short burst of small thrusters to bring the Hermes away from Constitution's docking bay. "Hello, Constitution. This is Hermes. We have a green light on our dashboard. We'll disengage when you give the signal." "Roger that, John. You're green to disconnect." On board the shuttle were pilots John Norton and Alan Tate. Sandra Nolan was on board as a flight technician. Her job on this mission was to capture the canisters from Mir 2 and get the unmanned NASA probe up and running. "Sandra, where's our ship and modules, front or back?" 5 kilometers ahead, to kilometers lower orbit than our current position. "Simon is sending the final course information to our computers." Norton checked with his monitor. A clear trajectory was reported from the command center. Hermes was instructed to change course. Visual contact. "John." Norton smiled broadly at his co-pilot. "Great. It's home, okay? Sandra, we have rendezvous with the probe. Get ready to release the solar wing, which you can see on the port side of the probe with the robotic arm. You only get one chance. We need to conserve fuel." Radio silence. Norton shrugged. He turned up the volume on the radio. Hello, Sandra. We're ready when you are. You have a green light. Please confirm. Still radio silence. Norton looked at Alan skeptically. Do you think she forgot to switch on her equipment? Negative, John. Sandra may be an untrained astronaut, but she knows her job inside out. She's probably not ready with the robotic arm. Maybe it's teething or stuck. Yes, you're right. Stay in position. We'll give her some time. Just then, Simon's voice rang out in the cockpit. Hermes, we have a problem. Go ahead. Constitution, Norton replied in surprise. We're missing a spacesuit. Well, it can't just disappear like that. That's not the worst of it. John, Major Arseni is missing too. He's not in his cabin. Tanja, Jean-Pierre, and Professor Sakov have been looking for him all over the Constitution. We have been unable to locate him. We believe that Norton jumped up. He looked anxiously at Alan and shouted, he's in the cargo hold of the Hermes. Sandra, Alan, inform Constitution that we have received their signal. I'll go to the cargo hold and stop him. Close the cargo hatches when I give the word over the radio. Try to maintain contact with the cargo probe. Don't let it get away from us. Save your thrusters. We still need to capture the Vermeer canisters. I'm starting to pull into the airlock room. Equalize the pressure when I give the signal. But we have to check your spacesuit. We don't have time for that. John, I don't like it. We have no choice. The American pressed his upper body against his lower body. He reached for his space helmet. The Australian gave up protesting. What's he up to? How should I know? Alan. He's desperate. Desperate men can do anything. Maybe he'll try to hijack Hermes and fly back to Earth. But Earth is dead. He connected the oxygen to the suit. He obviously won't accept that any more than I will. But I can't change the conditions where I want to go. He pulled on his gloves. In the rear of the cockpit and small passenger cabin was the airlock. It made it possible to get directly into the cargo hold. When the hatches were open, the way to the outer space was clear. People in the cargo hold had to wear spacesuits when the hatches were pulled to the side. Norton slammed the visor down. There was no time for a thorough check of the spacesuit. The slightest crack, and he was a dead man. He pulled the lever to open the outer hatch just as Alan activated a spotlight. The entire cargo bay was lit up and blindingly bright. At the opposite end were Major Arsenage and Sandra Nolan, both wearing white spacesuits. Arsenage had tied the small French woman to his body with a rope. Hello, Arsenage. What are you up to? I want to take over the shuttle. You can go back to the space station. I want to go back to Earth. Why? It doesn't make sense. Major, Earth is dead, totally bombed out. You won't find life on the old planet. It's extinct. As Norton spoke, he started moving carefully. Thanks to the many handles that sat vertically along the cargo hold, like steps on a ladder, Arsenage made a movement with his left hand. He held a knife, its blade flashing in the bright light. He brought it up in front of Sandra's visor. She screamed in terror. Norton stopped again. Don't move. Commander, shout the Russian major. You said yourself that the Earth is dead. Norton said. Why do you still want to go there? Because it's insane to stay up here. We're just a bunch of lab rats locked in a cage. I may be crazy, but I'm not insane. I want to see for myself if there's still any life on the Earth. There isn't. Everything is destroyed. There is nothing left. Then we'll die together, said Arsenage, smiling slightly. You, me, and the French woman. Listen to me, Commander. All I want is to return to Earth. You intend to send the shuttle back. It can't hurt you if I fly along as a passenger. Look at it this way. When I'm gone, there will obviously be one less person on board the space station who will consume air, eat food, and drink water. In the long run, a large amount of supplies. Norton plunged forwards unnoticed. He managed to steal 10 centimeters for every one they spoke. Quite right, Arseni. But you have no Earth to return to. He gained a little ground, okay? If you insist. I do, Arseni. Let's make a deal. First we capture the probe and the canisters from Mir 2. Then we'll fly back to Constitution and load the supplies on board. Then you can take over the shuttle and fly it back. You're right. With one less man, we'll save a lot of supplies in the long run. The commander paused and waited for Arsenage's response. He saved another step without the Russian noticing. No, Commander, we're canceling the idea of the containers. It's a trap. We're flying back to the space station now. But we can't survive without those canisters. Arsenage, Norton shouted. Another step. You can't survive on the Constitution, Arsenage shouted back in very bad English with Russian auxiliary words. Are you going to deny us our future? You have no future, Commander. I refuse to believe it. It is precisely by setting the goal that we have something to live for. It is the goal that keeps the spirit alive. Forget the Earth. Come to your senses and join us. You two will find your place on board. American propaganda, Commander, no, Major. It's common sense. You will always stigmatize me for what I did to Tanja. You hate me. No, Major, there is such a thing as forgiveness. Believe me, they had lowered their voices. Fatigue was setting in. What exactly is your objective, Commander? Only Demeter separated Norton and Sandra. He tried to signal her with his glove to stand still. To survive. Major, our goal is survival, something you also know as a highly trained professional soldier. At that moment, the spotlight switched off. Only light from the blue planet, its distant sun, fell through the cargo bay's elongated hatches. Norton's eyes quickly adjusted to the sudden drop in light, and he could just barely make out the Major. The Russian officer could no longer see Norton's person. He began frantically searching for some fabric from Sandra Nolan's life-saving suit. The little French space specialist realized that her opponent was blind and began to resist. Hermes' thrusters ignited. Norton leapt forwards, towards the Russian, just as he grabbed Arseni's spacesuit. The small shuttle moved forwards in a powerful jolt. The three astronauts were thrown back against the rear wall of the cargo bay. Norton felt a blow to one of his shoulders as he hit the hull with great force. The Russian had dropped his knife, and it was heading into infinite space and Earth orbit. Norton's body, protected by a thick suit, mashed against the Major's ditto. The American's speed acted like a billiard ball hitting another, setting it in motion. In the next movement, Norton managed to grab the rope that was tied around Sandra and Arsenage. He pulled and the rope popped open. The French woman was free. Norton pushed her away from himself and to the safety of the Russian officer. Sandra, get back to the airlock now, Norton shouted. She obeyed, screaming for help in French. Constitution's boss floated away uncontrollably and hit the cargo bay wall. The Russian, who had a much harder time in the weightless environment due to inexperience, glanced towards outer space. The cargo hatches had not connected to each other. The moving parts of the robot arm had become trapped between the two hatches. An elongated section of 75 centimeters had formed along the hatches. The Major pushed off and headed for the opening. He shouted, "You shall not take me alive." Norton watched in horror as Arseni headed for space. He grabbed a handle on the inside of Hermes and went for it. Arsenage had no way of stopping his speed in the weightless space. He slammed into one of the hatches at high speed. There was a thud of metal on metal. He lost consciousness for a brief moment. When he came to, Norton was hanging on by his one out in the boot. Norton tried in vain to pull Arseni back into the hold. The Russian Major kicked backwards and hit Norton's shoulders twice. The commander had to let go, and he floated back towards the cargo hold floor. It was too risky to start a real fight with the Russian. The spacesuits were too fragile and life was too precious. Arsenage chuckled to himself. He grabbed one of the hatches and pulled himself over the edge so he had a view down to Earth. The majestic view took his breath away, but the Russian officer had made his decision. He had no future. On the Constitution, his plan to return to Earth had failed. Barbara, John here. We've spent 40 minutes capturing the Vermeer canisters and activated the cargo probe from Earth. Sandra has been acting as a living robotic arm and has done a marvelous job. Unfortunately, we lost Major Arsenage. I wasn't able to save him.
Dr. Barbara Randell reported on Commander Norton's own account. Hermes took 35 minutes to pass through the atmosphere. In a long glide, the space shuttle managed to fly down without any problems. At an altitude of 75 kilometers, the temperature on the outside of the spacecraft reached over 1500 degrees Celsius in several places. The moment the space shuttle descended into lower and calmer air layers, the protective box of the video camera popped off. The video camera began to take pictures. The first signals Constitution received showed nothing but darkness. Here and there, the crew sensed small lines as signs of rain. "It is snow," Alan replied. Norton turned his body and looked questioningly at Sandra. "The radar is working, Commander. The altimeter is working. The automatic scientific instruments are working. Thank you, Sandra. What do the instruments tell us about the atmosphere? The ozone layer has been reduced by over 40%. The consequence will be that the atmosphere will no longer be able to slow down the sun's ultraviolet rays." One moment. She worked with the computer. She checked once more and then looked up at Norton with large, clear eyes. "In the foreseeable future, the Earth will receive 10 times as much ultraviolet radiation as normal. Professor Sokoffs interjected, which means, John, that the people who weren't killed by atomic bombs will die of radiation and cancer. Another problem with ultraviolet rays is that they will also kill many plants and animals, which are the basis of the food chain in nature. So Earth has no chance of recovering. Not in the short term, John. It doesn't look good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Victor. The professor raised a hand to his mouth and tapped his index finger against it. He raised his voice so that the rest of the crew could hear him over the sound system. The meteorology of the entire world is incredibly complex, even under stable conditions. After more than 100 years of research, weather forecasts on Earth are still not entirely reliable, but Earth has been hit by a completely new system because rapid changes are taking place, and I can say with certainty that the climate balance on Earth has been disrupted. At this moment, the planet is experiencing an incipient polar climate across the entire Western Hemisphere. The reason for this is simple. Large amounts of dust have been whirled up into the atmosphere, originating from the fallout of atomic bombs, or waste, if you will. These enormous and numerous dust clouds will cause large parts of the world to rest in a year-long twilight. More than half of the world will experience the same climate as we encounter in the Siberian winter. Even in summer, which is the season that Hermes is currently experiencing, according to the calendar, the temperature is below freezing. Hermes has measured -5 degrees Celsius over the American mainland, where the temperature is normally between 15 and 20 degrees Celsius. The temperature is falling rapidly. Norton was shocked. He looked at Sokoff in despair. Dust clouds? Is that why we can't see anything from Hermes' video camera? A combination of dust and snow, and it's only just begun? Will this mean an ice age, Victor? I don't know, John. The Atlantic Ocean isn't frozen. But the Atlantic Ocean is so large that we would need extremely low and very prolonged cold temperatures. It's too early to say, but the surviving part of the population may perish before then due to a global famine. Famine. What will be next? Drinking water. I'm sure that if we could examine it in our laboratory, we would find it heavily contaminated. Drinking water across most of the Earth will be far too radioactive to drink for many years to come. Suddenly, Hermes' screen went black. Alan looked apologetically at Norton. I'm sorry, John, but we've lost Hermes. Maybe it flew into a mountain or a tall building. Norton stood up and shrugged his shoulders in resignation. Don't worry about it, Alan. Visibility was 0 and our flight data was insufficient. There's no point in guessing all sorts of things when we don't know the answer anyway. Now we know the condition of our home planet. Sokoff and Norton sat alone in the command center. Victor, don't you find it strange that in the 30 minutes we received signals from Hermes, there are only 3 seconds of clear images? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the weather has changed and a so-called pocket has formed, but you don't think so? I've never been a believer, Victor, and I'm still in doubt after what has happened. But maybe we are chosen. Maybe God is watching over us. Victor Sokoff looked skeptically at Norton. After studying him closely, he had to admit that the American was serious. Understand me correctly, Victor? We send the mini space shuttle off. It will send video images back to us. Images that we cannot initially interpret, but suddenly, at the end of the transmission, we capture a few images of the surface, clear as if we were physically present ourselves. As if someone is telling us that this is what it looks like now. Don't go down there. Dangerous area. Sokoff pushed himself up from his seat. He shrugged and flew towards the window in the command center. He made a movement with his head and turned his body towards the American chief. Are you convinced that we are some kind of Noah's Ark? A chosen people? Let's not get biblical, Victor, but I feel that we have been given a warning. Everyone is entitled to interpret it as they wish. John, I have fought for that right for many years. I am convinced that we were fortunate. Hermes happened to be in the middle of an air pocket. The sky was visible a few hundred meters ahead for a few seconds. John Norton looked warily at the flat surface that served as a floor. Maybe you're right, Victor. Maybe you are. Good night, John. Since that day, John Norton could not agree with himself whether they had experienced a revelation.
John Norton reporting. A hand gently touched my shoulders, turned my head. To my right, I saw a dark figure. Who was that? I asked, sleepily. Some time passed before a voice answered. It's Barbara. Can I switch on some light? Yes, I'll be up in a minute. I had never experienced before that there were some women who should not be allowed to board a space station. I hoped it was not the last time the wonderful ship S-Doctor would wander into my private quarters. I sensed a great hidden, but not forgotten, echo of passion. I hoped she couldn't feel it. We faced each other. Good morning, John. How are you feeling? Fine, thank you, considering the circumstances. A little tired, but otherwise okay. I stood up and was immediately at her side. I pulled her close and understood her state of mind. She felt pressure in my arms. I hope. We hung like that for a long time. I thought that one of the nicest things about being weightless was that you could really hold someone for a whole night or day, whatever, without restricting blood circulation. Some claimed that making love at 1G was so clumsy that they no longer got anything out of it. None of us said anything as they sailed around. As our minds wandered back in time to before the launch to Constitution, I suddenly remembered a report I had read. I gently pushed Dr. Randall's face up to mine. We made eye contact. Barbara, there's something that's been on my mind for a long time. Would you mind answering a question? It's private. She nodded. If I can. Before I flew up here on the shuttle, I was handed a bunch of reports about each crew member and their background. It said, you were at the front of the line when you applied for assignment to Constitution. Why was that? And how did you manage to get on board so quickly? As I recall, it only took you 4 months to leave. That must surely be a new record for a scientific astronaut. In my experience, the normal waiting time is between 2 and 3 years. She pulled away from me. It's a long story, John. It requires a tube of coffee. I can handle that.
Simon Hayes reporting Tanja Bunyan had a change of clothes. The white overalls uniform had been replaced with a tight-fitting, muscle-straining, Russian-made tracksuit. Tanja sat down on the exercise bike. She had a portable compact disc player on her belt. She switched it on, and Russian rock music played through the headphones she had brought with her. She started pedaling slowly, gradually picking up the pace. Eventually, her pace was so fast that sweat poured off her and disappeared. Sort of hood along the sides made sure to collect the droplets. Sweat could be reused for their water depot after a chemical purification. I woke up with a start in my bed. I could see through the glass door visible world that some of the cabin lights were switched on. I glanced out through the crack between the curtain and the door frame, and there she was. Tanja slipped past. She had wrapped a large towel around her body. She was wearing white underwear. With her other hand, she wiped her face with a wet wipe. My heart started pounding and I didn't dare breathe. Okay, old chap, you only have one chance? Take it, I whispered to myself. In my mind's eye, I dreamily saw Tanja standing in front of me. The desire for her made the blood in my body throb. No wonder Major Arsonage was going insane on board Mir 2 at the thought of Tanja. I was shaking all over. It was now or never. I resigned myself to waiting and gathered my courage.
Dr. Randall reporting. As stated in NASA's own reports and crew descriptions, I was married to Michael Lee Scott, an accomplished and respected administrator in the United States government. It was often the case that we only saw each other on weekends. He'd be at a political rally on one side of the country. I was at a medical conference at the other end. At one point, I was at a big international medical conference in Los Angeles on space medicine. Lectures, meetings, and receptions dragged on. I called Michael and told him I was going to be a little late. I estimated it to be 2 days longer than planned. Nevertheless, we came to an agreement and we finished a day early. I rushed home on the first scheduled flight to Washington, D.C. I was shaken, shocked, and angry. Very angry. Michael had picked up a young girl off the street and paid her to bind and whip him. It turned out that Michael loved being humiliated, not by me. I didn't know that. Something he had kept secret from me for all the years we had known each other. Perversity is definitely not me. The same goes for lies and deception. I regained my composure and relaxed. I sighed. I immediately demanded a divorce. Michael begged me to stay, but to no avail. I first moved to a hotel. Later, I moved back to my parents' house in a suburb of Washington. Michael kept contacting me. He called at all hours of the day and night. He wrote long emails, he sent hour-long homemade videotapes, all with the same message. I refused to listen to him. Finally, in a desperate attempt, he sent me a videotape where he could arrange for me to get my dream job through his connections at NASA as a medical doctor on the Constitution for the Mars astronauts. It only required the signature of his boss, the Vice President of the United States. The new crew would be in space for exactly 3 months. With my experience in space medicine and previous association with NASA, I would be a perfect choice for NASA. The fact that no other doctor had been appointed who would then be passed over made me say yes. Michael's arguments were good. We would benefit from being physically away from each other for 3 months, and the natural distance would make up for everything. In the meantime, I could think deeply about our marriage. There was 1 month left of my deployment when the disaster on Earth happened. I had made my choice by then. My answer to Michael would be that it was irrevocably over. I couldn't forgive him. I never got to tell him the few times we were in radio or video contact. Now it's too late. We looked at each other a long time. I asked cautiously, "And you, John?" He took a sip of his coffee. His face was sad and hard at the same time. "I lost my wife a few years ago. Sometimes I feel like it happened yesterday. She was hit by a drunk driver. We, the police, and I never found the driver, despite a long search and intense investigation. He ran away in his car while my wife bled to death on the road. If she had received prompt medical attention, she would have survived. But to what? To a postponed death due to an insane nuclear war? And who am I to put it like that? I can only speak in that direction because I know how things develop. The years I didn't get with my wife, I could of course use, even though we know the past. I would give anything to have some good years with my wife. At the time, I felt so powerless and helpless, I wanted to find the man and kill him. I carried that anger for years, and it grew and grew as time went on. Thanks to NASA and a certain psychologist, I kept my mind, my sanity. Now, I reckon he has received his punishment, although I no longer suffer from a thirst for revenge. Ironically, he saved my life. Had my wife been alive 2 weeks ago, I would have politely turned down NASA. He was no more than 44 years old, but he still felt he had left his youth behind on Earth. Whatever the future held, he would be haunted for the rest of his life by a sense of anticlimax and a knowledge of lost opportunities. I held out my hand to him, he took it. "I can only say the same," I whispered tragically. "Michael's perverse indiscretion saved my life too. Had I not caught him off guard that night, and that's not meant to be a big deal, I wouldn't have made it to Constitution." He bent his head and kissed my wet lips. "I've waited a long time for this." Only now he noticed that my hair was still wet. Today was my bathing day. "How long?" he asked. "Since you came on board." He held on to me as if he didn't want to let me go. "We have all the time in the world." He gently kissed my right hand. "John," I whispered. "Yes, make love to me." He nodded.
Tanja Bunyan reporting. I had taken off my last rest of clothing. I heard my fingers dancing across the fabric. A quality item I had never dreamed of. NASA's choice of a woman's innermost temptations was a white lace bra. So delicate that it could withstand the neon lights of the space station under her uniform, revealing more than just a girl's secret places. Panties that were analogous to cobwebs. I didn't associate much with space travel. Astronauts were obviously also into fashion. It was my first bath on the American space station. I tried to remember the instructions I had received from Sally Mansfield just 10 hours earlier. The water slowly trickled down my body, a stream of thin, stinging jets. The water flew around the cabin itself, like tiny snowflakes tossed around in a snowstorm. The water and airflow were a recirculating vacuum system that flew around the body, making the small amount of water sufficient for a bath. Simon was standing in a corner, but I didn't know that at that time. He decided that he had seen enough. He started to push himself away. At that moment, I turned around. I had got soap in my eyes, which was very irritating. I raised a hand to my face and removed the soap from my eyes. It was the best thing I'd experienced on the Constitution. I opened my eyes. "Simon!" I shouted loudly. "What are you doing?" He flinched and jumped back. "I'm sorry, Tanja. You see, honestly, I didn't know you were in the shower in the middle of the night. May I remind you that you hadn't drawn the curtain?" "So," I replied, "don't you think I noticed that you covered your reading lamp with a shirt?" "I hate the dark. A weakness from my childhood." "Nonsense, Simon. Why would you want to see me in the shower?" "Why? Why?" Because you're the most beautiful woman on earth." I grabbed another towel and started drying my long hair. "Does that give you the right to see me as I am born?" I came out. Simon took a step back. He was familiar with my temperament by now. "Okay, Tanja, you may not like to hear this. It was planned. I knew you were going to take a shower. I wanted to see you. It was stupid of me. Forgive me. Can I throw away my damn inhibitions?" "Go ahead, Simon. I want to see stop. Oh, damn it. Try me. Because I'm crazy about you. I've been looking for you in vain since you came up here." I laughed. Those were the words I wanted to hear. "Well, in vain. I don't think so." I loosened the towel around my body and let it float away. I reached for his hand. He took it. Because you were finally sincere, you're allowed to join me. I gave him a vague look. All over my body, and afterwards you must take me away to your cabin with the cozy lighting. 2 people in a telephone booth, cabin was awkward. Simon and I both agreed on that. 2 people in a sleeping bag was almost impossible. He pulled me close to him. I felt his warm body. A hand slowly began to massage my neck. I closed my eyes and enjoyed it. I could use a cigarette. Me too, Tanja. Unfortunately, alcohol and cigarettes are unobtainable up here. Thank God it's a different story with women. He gently patted my cheek. We looked at each other inquiringly. Simon, have you ever done it in zero gravity before? Never, and to be honest, we didn't get to try much. We were pretty much trapped in my sleeping bag and could hardly move. I kissed his lips gently, but still, it was lovely. I put my hand around his neck and pulled him close to me. And caressed me there. You know, Simon ignored the comment. I knew he was teasing. It was part of the game. A slight shiver ran through his body as he felt my nails lightly tracing his entire body. He automatically closed his eyes and enjoyed my long fingers caressing his chest. For a brief moment, we forgot about Earth.
This is the laboratorial module. It's full of plants' lights and it's boxed in plastic. It's also full of plants. We've got lettuce, tomatoes, carrots, cabbage, potatoes, beans, rice, and many more. We're gonna be growing these in swiveling tumblers, so these are like a normal pot would be. But the special thing about them is that they can spin, and by spinning, we can simulate the effect of gravitation on the roots of the plants. You can see that the effect of this spinning is actually quite strong. If I put my hand in there, you can see it's actually quite difficult to keep my hand straight because the plants are so heavy. So the effect of gravity on these plants will actually be quite natural. Even though we don't have real gravity, the roots will feel it. Behind me, you can see our artificial light. We have fluorescent tubes that are giving off a nice white light that the plants need to grow, and we can regulate that light as the plants grow. So when the plants are small, we can put the lights closer. Almost a third of the experiments were complete, but it was too early to hope for success. He gave Norton a mischievous look, indicating that he was changing the subject. Speaking of computers and their programmer, Tanja must spend her free time doing what she wants to do. What in particular are you thinking about? Victor, this morning, when I went to make some Russian tea, she left Simon's cabin. Amazing how the love life blooms up here. He was referring to Norton and Dr. Randall's relationship. It has long struck me that discipline and morale are high. Maybe it's because there are both men and women on board. Everyone wears clean uniforms. I have yet to meet an unshaven man, and personal hygiene is very high. The women still wear makeup and look beautiful. I'm sure it's because of the natural balance. It will help us survive. John, love affairs will never be banned on the Constitution, but one thing worries me. So, what? There are more men than women. It seems like people are starting to pair up. I know Alan is trying very hard to get hold of Sally. At the moment she's playing hard to get, but she's enjoying Alan's attentions. It's only a matter of time with them. Barbara and I are together, and now you're telling me that Tanja and Simon had been together last night. It comes as no surprise, but one man will be left over. Sakov nodded in his caring way that no one could emulate. Well, I understand what you mean. I remember seeing a film many years ago in Moscow. A doomsday film, actually. It was about a global nuclear war. Only at the South Pole did the human race survive. They all lived on an American base. There were about 100 men and 20 women. Every Saturday, the 20 women drew lots to decide which men they would be with. I don't want that kind of situation at Constitution. Neither do I, Victor. On the other hand, I have to be realistic and be one of those who are in surplus, and yet not. I will always live on the memories of Olga. I've always been faithful to her, and that's how it will be in the future. He smiled broadly. And which of the young women will want an aging man with almost no hair on his head? They can choose a young man like you. Oh, I think you're exaggerating, Victor. There's only 10 years difference between us. Norton looked skeptically at the movie professor. Sakov pointed his thumb backwards. Out in the space lab, astronaut Morlin has a visit from a cute little French radio specialist. It's been over 2 hours since she went out there. He glanced down at his wristwatch. Jean-Pierre can't take that long to show space lab. It's more like he's showing something else. Norton looked at Sakov in surprise. You're saying that Sandra and Jean-Pierre have got together? Yes, it spreads when your superior shows the way. Apparently, a new fashion is being created at Constitution. It seems you're more familiar with the conditions on board than I am. No offense, John. There are certain things you don't speak freely with the boss about. The new craze is to borrow the space lab for a few hours. Then you float around naked and make love. I can't believe it. I've heard from a reliable source that it's great to make love in a weightless state, especially when there's space. Norton smiled broadly. That's worth thinking about. Victor. Living room cabin that evening for a meeting at 18.00. Quiet guys. Quiet, Simon shouted. The rest of the gathering around the square table became calm. I have been given the honor of being the sole safe astronaut for the Mars spacecraft. To understand the draw, in exactly 5 days, I and my partner on the trip will fly up to Cosmos. At that very moment, the spacecraft is within range of our tugs. For crew members have volunteered, but only one can make the trip. I'm going to pull the lucky one out now. Everyone spontaneously clapped their hands. It was most reminiscent of a TV talk show from Earth. Simon took out 4 pieces of paper with their names on. He carefully crumpled the strips into small solid balls. He handed them to Sandra, who wrapped each ball in a piece of tin foil. Simon got the wrapped balls back and put them in a cloth bag. No cheating, Alan shouted and laughed. Simon began carefully mixing the contents of the bag. He cut a grinning mass and glanced expectantly round at the 4 competitors. He pulled out a silver ball. He removing the paper. The winner is Tanja Bunnan.
Commander John Norton reporting. The 2 tugboats, Adam and Eve, were sent towards the Mars spacecraft at the exact moment when they were closest to each other. The calculation was so simple that when the tugboats arrived, their travel time was as short as possible. On the flat decks of the tugboats, Alan and Jean-Pierre had welded 2 backrests at a 90-degree angle. Simon and Tanja sat strapped to the backrests, wearing spacesuits. Simon had also brought the cable that was connected to the Mir containers. The containers were empty and were to be used as cargo boats. The journey towards Cosmos went according to plan and without any problems until they were 200 meters from the Mars ship. But they gradually began to sense the ship's compactness and size a little further away. The 2 astronauts could glimpse a large collection of tiny objects that indicated where Mir 2 had orbited the Earth. These were remnants of the old space station that gravity had not yet claimed. Concern grew on the Constitution when they discovered that Tanja's heart simulator was flashing frantically on the control panel. I contacted Tanja in a calm and clear voice. "Hello, Tanja. Is everything all right?" "I'm a little shocked by the size and our speed. We'll slow Eva down." "Thank you, Commander. Not feeling well. I'm dizzy." "It's only natural, Tanja. You're on a small spaceship." I would also feel very small with the Mars spaceship and Earth in the background. But I can assure you, everything is as it should be. Find a place on the spaceship where you can fix your gaze, and then keep your gaze fixed there. "Okay, Commander? I'm scared, but I'll try not to wet my pants. I found an airlock amidships. Can you see any lights?" "Negative, Commander. Everything seems dead." 100 meters. You're almost there. Tanja and Simon, we're activating your stop rockets. Watch out for the jolt. "Ready," replied Tanja. Even under the most favorable circumstances, it was not easy to board an abandoned and completely passive spaceship. Alan received the final approach instructions from Simon. The tugs were now practically at rest relative to Cosmos. Meanwhile, Dr. Randall took over communication with Tanja. "Hello, Tanja. This is Barbara. I'm taking over now. Nice to hear your voice, Barbara. Thank you. Remember, don't look at Earth, but don't close your eyes either. Breathe calmly. Your heart is beating like a drum machine. I can feel it. I hope we can get in. It would be a shame to find the door locked now that we've arrived. Hello, Constitution." Simon is in contact with the airlock complex in the middle section. From my position, about 60 meters from the hull itself, the ship looks complete. I have the magnetic grippers out. Alan, turn off the engine. The most critical phase of the maneuver was still 30 seconds away. Understood, Tanja, and done. Hello, we're here. The magnetic grippers grabbed hold of the ship's outer hull, but the worst was not over yet. Too much speed and they would crash into the Mars spacecraft. Simon contacted the Constitution. He still had to control cables connected to Adam Allen. Fired the brake rocket on probe 1. I have visual contact with all 4 of them. It looks good. Tanja and Simon saw a flash of light. The rocket thrusters were working as intended, and the probe speed was decreasing. As it was connected in series with the others, they also responded as intended. Simon grabbed the cables and carefully pulled the cable into place in a reel mounted on the tugboat. Simon slowly pulled the 4 probes into place and parked them in a stationary orbit, just 10 meters from Cosmos. Hello, Constitution? The bull is caught and tamed. We're trying to open the hatch to Cosmos. Okay, Simon, we're with you all the way. The Englishman handed the hatch over to his beloved. Tanja examined it carefully. Constitution, we found the controls for the hatch itself, but there's no power. Professor Sakov, code signer of the spacecraft, intervened over the radio. Tanja, there is a manual lever to the left of the buttons. It should work. Received, Professor. We'll try. Time aboard the Constitution passed agonizingly slowly. But finally, the message came from Simon. Constitution, we've got the lock open. We're going in. A few dust particles, driven forward by a puff of air from inside, flew out like sparkling diamonds as the bright sunlight caught them. All right, Englishman, into American-Russian territory. From the docking station, Tanja and Simon floated directly into the ship's combined living room, kitchen, and conference room. It was a faithful replica of Mir's interior, so Tanja was on home turf. Simon had hoped that the emergency lighting would work, but there was no light. As far as he could see, everything was fine. Of course it's fine, he said irritably to himself. Why would it be anything else? The Constitution's second in command was lying horizontally across the control panel. On the 4th attempt, they managed to turn on some of the lights on the bridge that were not on the same circuit as the fluorescent tubes. They contacted an anxious space station. Hello, Constitution. Hey, we have managed to get lights in almost all accessible cabins. We have been around the living quarters. We are now splitting up. Tanja's task will be to find technical aids. Mine will be to find food, clothing, and plants. How much time do we have? 2 hours and 13 minutes. I replied via radio, okay? We're in a hurry. We're behind the schedule we set on Constitution. We'll report back in 30 minutes. Be careful. Understood. Over from Cosmos. The landing spacecraft garage was filled with electronic components and small devices. K, the landing craft's control and safety system. K said, carefully turned towards the end wall and spotted 2 large black bags made of heavy-duty plastic. The landing craft was never transported up to Cosmos. Bluth misplaced. K. Bags were closed with a zip and attached to the wall with large straps. She gently pushed one of the bags. It was hard. She called Simon on the radio, but her patience was exhausted before he reached her. She carefully unzipped the bag 30 centimeters and forced the plastic aside. Slowly, something that looked like hair slipped out of its prison. Tanja jumped back in fright, her heart pounding. The bag collapsed. The air in the module quickly began to smell rotten, and out tumbled a human being, half dissolved by decay. She felt a moment of nausea, followed by horror. There was a piercing scream. Simon grabbed a panicked Tanja. He looked at her frightened face. Tanja, for God's sake. Tanja, what's going on? She pointed in shock at the decomposed, floating corpse. His stomach turned when he saw the decomposed body. He quickly pushed Tanja out of the garage module. Then he slammed the hatch shut. He pulled the crying woman close to him. Calm down, Tanja. I'm right here. She clung to him and never wanted to let him go. She was shaking all over. He was wearing a Russian uniform. Simon, he looked seriously into her wet eyes. Are you sure, Tanja? He considered his next move and continued. Of course, it's a Russian. Nothing else makes sense. We shot the American astronauts down through the atmosphere. They were dissolved into pure atoms. Must be the 2 Russian Mars cosmonauts. He grabbed Tanja's shoulders and forced her to look at him. Think back to when you were on Mir 2. Was there anyone on board who who said they had to be eliminated? Boris Arsenich. Tanja's thoughts went back to her time on Mir 2. It was clear to her that Simon was right. Now I remember. I'm sure our senior pulled Gagarin's Captain Kisme aside. Captain, I have a small change to your flight plan. It's all I heard. They continued talking away from the rest of us. I then noticed that Captain Kisme was pale and anxious. She had probably been ordered to fly to Cosmos with the bodies after the space shuttle docked from Mir 2. I just don't know why they didn't use the same method as you and shoot the cosmonauts down through the atmosphere. Simon clenched his right hand and tensed every muscle in his arm. Maybe there's a reason, and if I hadn't seen it, I would have refused to believe it. He slammed his fist in sheer rage into the ship's partition. Then, the roles were reversed. Tanja spent minutes calming him down. They agreed to contact Constitution. Thanks to Tanja's fighting spirit, he was able to participate in the collection of supplies, but at half power. It took her over an hour to recover. Simon sent the 2 dead cosmonauts into orbit around Earth. In minutes, the atmosphere would pull them in due to the inevitable gravity. They would dissolve into nothing. He then cooled down the radiation box in the reactor so that it ran at minimum power and prevented too much radiation. He made sure that all systems on board ran at half power so they could return at a later date. Okay? Vigil lights shone constantly on the bridge. Simon helped Tanja into the Cosmos airlock. Before connecting the helmet to the spacesuit, he gave her a kiss on the cheek. Are you okay, honey? She winked back. I'll be fine. And the 4 probes filled half full, mostly with wrapped plants, food, and clothes. Oh, I have to correct you a little. We can get supplies when Constitution and Cosmos are in almost the same orbit, right, Tanja? He switched on his radio in the spacesuit. Constitution, I intend to take a break when we return home. It'll be at least 2 days in the bunk. That's okay, I replied. 2 days is allotted for both astronauts. Okay, Alan, get ready to fly us back, okay? The orbit is programmed in. Roger that. Simon, I'm ready when you are. In the radiation dose, Professor, you're on schedule. You have both received 0.6 milliram per hour. You are out of danger, came the reassuring voice of Viktor Sakov. Best of all, the power systems are fine. Main reactor stable and batteries in good condition. Almost all the circuit breakers were switched off, perhaps by the last man before abandoning the vessel, with the positive result that all essential equipment has been preserved. So that's why we can say that we're coming home.
A wide shadow colored the chair black. Tanja turned her head. Behind her stood John Norton. She motioned for him to sit in the other armchair. He did so, his face still pale, his eyes still red-rimmed from lack of sleep. They glanced at the eternally cloudy Earth. Nice work on the Mars ship, Tanja. We now have the opportunity to top up our reserves. She nodded gratefully. He continued, is it true that you hacked into the surveillance camera from Earth? Yes. Commander, it took me no time at all. It's a small town in the western United States, near the Nevada desert. Well, why don't we see how our bombed-out planet is faring? We're getting used to our little island in space. I wonder if we'll ever be able to return. Norton stood up and switched on a small monitor in the Telltale Instruments section. A camera on Earth automatically started recording from the small dusty town. In the middle of nowhere, he sat back down with a remote control in his hand. Little progress, Commander. Most of the dust has settled on the surface itself. The storm is very powerful. The temperature has risen by ½ degree in 2 weeks. It's now -4 degrees centigrade. Norton checked with the gauge on the side of the monitor. Unfortunately, the concentration of ultraviolet radiation will increase as the power of the sun increases. Just 5 minutes indirect sunlight will cause 3rd-degree burns on the skin. The little dots traveling around on the camera lens. Atmospheric interference? I don't think so. Tanja, maybe insects. Insects are resistant to radioactivity, and many diseases are spread by insects. Tanja pulled her face closer to the monitor and squinted her eyes. There's something. At that moment, a ghostly shadow moved along the screen. Tanja flew back in her chair in surprise. There's something moving. Oh my God. What is it? Norton shouted. I'm taking over the camera from the command center. Tanja worked quickly with the computer. I'm turning the camera. She moved the joystick. Norton's voice was wobbly. Is a human, Tanja? I think so. Recorded on the hard disk. Done. I've got it in the viewfinder. Tanja shouted triumphantly. Freeze the image. Tanja looked at Norton, shaking. He activated his radio. Command center. Are you following the monitor? Yes. John Allen replied. Any suggestions? There's life down there. There's life where there shouldn't be life. Maybe a human, maybe a video lens malfunction, or an electronic effect on the radio signals. Allen's partner Sandra Nolan interrupted, not believing it herself. The shadow, dressed in a heavy dark protective suit, moved quickly but with angular movements towards the probe's camera. They observed what looked like a stick or thick branch being thrown violently towards the lens. Then there was a black screen. Damn, whoever that person was, he deliberately destroyed our video camera. But here's our proof. Only a human is capable of destroying with tools. It was a human, the poor thing. Tanja continued, we must never underestimate nature. Life forms can survive in small niches on the planet that seem totally unsuitable for life. We know this from the coldest parts of the earth, or the depths of the ocean. Life was found there even though it was thought to be impossible. Species are created and die endlessly. Perhaps the earth is already in a revival period. Who knows? Maybe the time of man has come back. Maybe some other mammals. We are products of processes that took place far away in both time and space under conditions so unimaginable that we can barely process them. Dr. Randall squatted between Tanja and Norton, leaning against the chairs. The commander turned his body and looked at the depressed doctor. Life on Earth, whoever we saw there, is probably broken down and confused. He moved and behaved like a robot. Maybe he's walking around in a dream world. Is our place a dream world? No. It's nice to live here, but I miss being able to go for a walk in a forest among lakes, a shower in the Amazon rainforest, birds and animals. Barbara Randall smiled gently at her Russian friend, a cue. I miss things that I hated when I lived on Earth. I miss rain, snow, wind and storms. But most of all, of course, a beach, blue sky, and a swim. John Norton pulled his partner in close. There is one thing that all the misfortunes of the world cannot take away from us, or the high risk of lethargy or apathy, safety. The security of being with another human being is extremely important. Feelings must be given free rein. John, you amaze me. This was a subject they had never heard Norton talk about. He continued in his own thoughts. Love saved my life. I fell in love in the middle of the worst crisis of my life. I thank God every day that the love was reciprocated. I fell in love with the person, Barbara. Her sweet and gentle nature. I had no doubt that we would have a good and happy life together, even though the circumstances were almost inhuman and scary. Thank you, John. The world disaster has brought us closer together, made our love bigger and deeper. I have learned so much about myself and John. I can now see again the beauty of a sunrise and the eternal mystery of space. I think every time that it's a miracle that I get to experience it once again, together with John. Tanja said, life lately has been hard, terrible, unforgiving. My feelings for Simon have also been incredibly tested, but our relationship has survived. Perhaps because we have always realized the need to share thoughts, opinions, and feelings. Norton replied in a whisper, with the atomic age, man opened the door to a new world. What exists? No one knows. We have indeed learned many things, but most of all we have learned that we still have much to learn. Doctor. Randall kissed him gently on the cheek and took over. The most important thing in life, for better or worse, is to stick together as long as we are here.